Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and begin our workshop meeting of the Vista City Council with a roll call from our city clerk, Kathy Valdez.
The record shall reflect that all members are present.
And Deputy Mayor Contreras will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening.
All right, ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now we have a procedural item from our city clerk, Kathy Valdez.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to remind everyone that the Vista Municipal Code requires members of the public to observe order and decorum at the meeting and to conduct themselves in a courteous manner. The ordinance was adopted to allow for public input and to facilitate city business without disruption of the meeting. Applause is appropriate for items listed under the presentation portion of the agenda only. I'm not sure if we have any students. Looks like we might have a few. Students wishing to receive credit for attending this evening's meeting must stay for a minimum of 1 hour. When you are ready to leave, you may ask one of the staff members at the back of the room to sign your paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To speak on an item on the agenda, please fill out a speaker slip with the number of the item that you want to speak on and give it to the clerk, secretary, staff. Speaker slips are available on the table just outside the main doors. Speakers will have 3 minutes to address the city council meeting. Our first item this evening is oral communications. Any member of the public may address the city council on agency-related matters that are not on the agenda by requesting to speak during this section of the agenda. The number of speakers that will be heard during this segment is limited to 10. Any remaining speakers will be heard under the second oral communications item. And we do have one oral communications speaker this evening, and that is Carol Jeffries. You should be live now.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see any. Okay, well, I'm pretty much talking on what you guys are addressing tonight, and I just wanted to throw my support and enthusiasm behind any improvement in transit and mobility, walkability, bikeability, just getting around on buses and stuff like that, because I just think that we really need to, the only way to improve and get people using transit is to make it better. And we need more frequency and more reliability. And I'm really excited about hearing what's going on with the rail trail. And just generally excited about this meeting, so do me proud.
We have two presentations this evening, and we'd like to begin by welcoming Kareem Scott and Alan Kossip from Caltrans, who will present on the North County Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan. Thanks for being with us tonight. Just press that red button in front of you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much for having us. Alan Kossip, Corridor Director for Caltrans, and Kareem Scarlett was the project manager on the project. Maybe I'll go to... So what we wanted to talk a little bit about today is the CMCP. We've been working with your staff for the last 3 years on a CMCP. It's a long name, and so first thing you'll be asking is why do we need one of those and what's in it? So we'll be hitting the highlights of why it's important, and then we'll dive into sort of the recommendations, transportation recommendations that have come out of it, specifically programs and projects, and then sort of next steps. How do we implement this? The last thing we all need is another plan, so we really got to make it come to life. Next slide. So when we talk about the CMCP, what's different about this in a normal plan? Historically, we planned modes separately. So Caltrans worked on highways, cities worked on streets, NCTD worked on transit, and then we end up with 3 sets of projects that we hoped sort of work together. Over the last 10 or 15 years, I think there's been a real change on recognition that really we need to plan these as systems. And we need to work together and do that. And so the CMCPs are that document. They bring the objectives and the goals of all the agencies together and then out comes a holistic blueprint that a region can use or a sub-region can use. It's really it's the next step of the RTP, right? We've worked really hard as a region on RTP, but that's a really large countywide document. So as we zoom in to a sub-region, we can get into more of the details, and we can look at some of the development plans that are happening. Where's the activity zones, and really look at origins and destinations. Where do people want to go to and from? And so the CMCPs give us that opportunity. They're also becoming sort of the standard in order to compete nationally for funding and at state level for funding. Everyone wants to see this systems approach, and they want to make sure it's a long-term sustainable plan, and we're not just moving the problem from point A to point B. So that's why these have become sort of really important. And so this CMCP, and Kareem, help me, what does the CMCP stand for? Because they are going to ask me that.
It's the it is the Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan.
Okay, thank you. Ours is the blue area, so it's all 5 cities. So Escondido, San Marcos, Vista, Carlsbad, Oceanside, a little bit of the county. In it, 661,000 people currently live. And so, as we talk in the region or we talk in the state about why is it important to invest in North County, because it's 20% of our jobs, right, in the region. It's 20% of our population. And so you kind of just gives us a little demographic feel for who lives in the corridor. The corridor, again, when we're talking about transportation, it's both the regional spines, Sprinter, 78, as well as the key mobility arterials, the key active transportation corridors. These are the things that make the region work as a whole. They're not so much local access, but they're the real regional skeleton, if you would, of transportation. Next slide. So one of the things, that we did in terms of getting this done, as I said, it's taken us almost 3 years, over 3 years to get it done. It was important that this was a collaborative effort. And so really 3 levels of collaboration. We had a technical working group with all the cities, their city staffs, and CTD's technical staff. So that was one layer. We had a stakeholder working group. And then we had a number of public outreaches. And one of the things we did with the public outreach is using social media, allowing people to drop pins about where their transportation gets stuck. What are the problems for them? What's not comfortable? What's not safe in their mind? So, we ended up with this plethora of data that really became the backbone for solving the problem. Next slide. And so, some of the key challenges probably aren't that surprising. I mean, they're probably pretty consistent across the region. Land use obviously makes, it can be difficult to serve with transit just because of the spread out land use. But there was some real key differences in this corridor. And one is the regional spines don't really align well with the major O&Ds, right? Origins and destinations. So if you're trying to get to the Carlsbad Employment Center, 78 doesn't go there. If you're trying to get to Camp Pendleton, 78 doesn't go there. Sprinter doesn't go there. And so you really rely then on the arterial system in order to connect these major places. That's not true in other places like Sorrento Valley. You've got 5 and 805 just kind of go right to the doorstep. These are the type of things that we think about when we try to then bring in the solution layers. The other thing that's sort of unique to this is, there's no major north-south regional spines between Lausanne 5 and 15. That's like 17 miles, right? And so it's another case of people loading up those arterials to get places. They have to go north-south in order to go east-west sometimes. Next slide. And we also did a deep dive in some of the data, some key thoughts I just highlight. One key thought is that not a lot of people relative go from one end of the corridor to the other end of the corridor. That's sort of counterintuitive. I think a lot of people think that's where they go. We find that about 50 to 60% of the people who are getting off 15 or 5 then get off to their community within the first 3-4 miles. So when we're looking at investments, that's a good place to focus our money. Some other key thoughts are 75% of the trips are less than 10 miles, 50% of the trips are less than 3 miles. And so again, it's about connecting communities maybe as opposed to investing in longer range trips. Next slide.
Okay, this one's mine. Okay, so in the plan, we developed basically a strategy toolbox, where we could actually apply these improvements kind of like layers over a facility or a geographical area. I guess later in the presentation, we have a couple slides that kind of showcase that as an example. But looking at the layers here, as you can see, we were looking at smart arterials and intersections, as well as highway improvements, active transportation improvements, reconnecting communities, sprinter improvements, ICM, as well as others. And like I said, we have an example of how that actually gets applied. So in this presentation, hold on, let me go to it. Okay. So let's start with the mobility hubs. So in this instance, mobility hubs are basically activity centers within the downtown areas of the local jurisdiction. So you can see we have one in Escondido, we have one around Cal State San Marcos, as well as downtown Vista, along the Palomar Airport Road, and then downtown Oceanside. And so these areas are areas of high activity right now, but then also in the future, they're going to be areas where you're going to have a lot of densification for jobs as well as residential homes. And then we have the mobility boulevards that are in yellow, and basically these are the workhorses that Alan kind of talked to. These also connect the mobility hubs as well, and they focus more in on people throughput. So you'll have not only vehicle lanes, but then potential bus lanes. You'll have protected bike facilities along these routes as well, to have basically a multimodal type of experience along these routes. And then finally, the regional spines are the big spines where we're talking about the Inland Rail Trail, Sprinter, 78, 76, I-5, as well as I-15, and within these areas, we're talking basically managed lanes and other types of improvements. So the following is an example of that layering concept that I was talking about, and this one is focused in on the 1578 area. In this instance, we're including the 1578 managed lanes project that we have currently under environmental review. Sprinter double tracking, basically between the Escondido Transit Center and Cal State San Marcos. So basically connecting those two mobility hubs, as well as a new connection to the Inland Rail Trail going from Cal State San Marcos via Barham Drive. And then also a technology component that could be overlaid within this area, which is the ICM, which essentially is the connected ramp meters, as well as other improvements such as community connections and improved local access. Another example is for the Sprinter, where we would be layering station access improvements and also flexible fleet services. We are also looking at double tracking to increase on-time performance, as well as increasing service frequency from the 30 minutes that's currently being serviced to 15 minutes. And then also we identified multiple grade crossings that need to be addressed as well. And then finally, the extension down to the Escondido Mall along Via Rancho Parkway. So in summary, the total plan is around $5.6 billion in capital cost. And then the operating cost is, about $3 billion, and you can see the breakdown based upon the 5 big moves and where the money is being spent. And so for Sprinter, it's not only the double tracking, but then also it's the other components for the Transit Leap, which includes BRT, new types of trains, as well as other items, and then also the freeway component, which includes 1578, the 78 managed lanes, as well as 578. And then you see the Next OS, which is the technology component, and mobility hubs, as well as the flexible fleets. Okay. So with all of those improvements, we basically did a model that kind of showcases the improved access performance when those projects are, have been built. And so currently, right now, this is along, I think this is where San Marcos Boulevard turns into Palomar Airport Road. And this is the current reach, using transit within 30 minutes. And then this is the new reach, utilizing, or with the new projects, placed in there. Now folks that live in Escondido can get to the job center in Carlsbad within 30 minutes, utilizing transit. So the following are a couple of bundles that we kind of put together, since the project, or the overall cost of the project is pretty substantial. So we tried to bundle the improvements for a geographical area. So beginning with the Inland Gateway, which is essentially the couple previous slides that I showed, with the 1578 improvement, as well as a new rapid BRT service that would come from Escondido, as well as improvements to Sprinter between Escondido and San Marcos. The next one is the Coastal Bundle, which would include the 578 interchange project, as well as additional funding for the Buena Vista Lagoon restoration, as well as the last segment of the Inland Rail Trail that still needs to be constructed from Vista through Oceanside. And then also it includes the I-5 HOT hot lanes between 78 up to 76. And then lastly, the north-south arterials. Like we previously said, these arterials are really important to move people from the regional spines to their final destinations. And so we would look at looking at those arterials for improvement. So that would include the Sprinter Sprinter signal modernization, as well as the Buena Creek Rail Crossing. And then also there is a North County Connecting Community Intersection Service program that's part of this, and there's a potential $10 to $25 million grant request that we're looking at, as well as laying down the foundation for the mobility hubs that are shown within the slide.
Thank you, Kareem. One of the things we also wanted to stress is a lot of these aren't new ideas, right? Hopefully some of the things you see is though bringing this together as a system, and instead of individual projects, you see these bundles And, you know, one of the things we probably didn't highlight, this is a 30-year plan, right? So it's not going to get all built in one day, nor does it need to be built all in one day, right? Because this is accommodating future population, future technology that's not even here yet. So, you know, the bundles that we just highlighted would be those things that, you know, right out of the chute, or would be the higher priority things as we worked with the technical group. That's some of the themes we heard. That build a foundation for the future system, but address today's needs as well. And the good news as well is a lot of these projects are already underway as we all work together. You know, you're working on things, we're working on things, Sandag's working on things, and they all seem to fit together. So that was a really positive message. We weren't, you know, off doing things that weren't, you know, working cohesively. Sometimes we maybe just don't communicate that well, that system is getting built as a system. These bullets or the highlighted balls are the projects that are already underway in the plan. Next slide. And, you know, final kind of thought is that this isn't a funding plan, right? So everyone wants to know what's next. This is meant to paint that vision, to bring us together so that we can then go compete for funds as a sub-region, right? And as a sub-region, agree together on what those priorities are and help each other get there. And I think one of the things that's the takeaway is back to that short trip. You know, a lot of angst and priority of connecting the communities and not necessarily getting long-range trips, right? That if we're looking at a limited budget, maybe those are priorities that we should be working on together. And to that end, you know, one of the things we talked about is the two ends or the bottlenecks. Think of it as a funnel. Traffic backs up into your community, but in part because the bottleneck is broke at the two places where they try to get on the interstate, and it just keeps queuing up. If we can fix that, then maybe we don't need to, in the near term, build the managed lanes through the middle, and that saves money that we can then reinvest elsewhere in this corridor. So, you know, that's another example of why these plans are powerful. And then, you know, to let you know what those priorities are so that then we can work on our processes to get us all there. So we talked about prioritizing early success, short-term implementation, and a lot of interest by all the cities about, you know, being state-of-the-art, getting ahead of the curve, piloting stuff, smart intersections. That's an emerging area. Vehicle to infrastructure, how to make this intersection smart to make sure that if someone's crossing the street and someone's running a red light, what do we do with that? You know, and so that technology is here. And so I think we need to, you know, showcase it some places. And so a lot of interest in doing that in this corridor as well. So that's our summary in a nutshell. Questions?
Councilmember Melendez.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much for the presentation. But you know, in this North County Strategy Toolbox, I didn't see rapid helicopter services, and I'm kidding, but that would be amazing. This is really exciting stuff. These are really exciting layers that we're putting over community needs, right? We're reflecting on what the community needs, where they need to go. I love the emphasis on job centers. And, you know, how does someone get from their front door to that place of employment or to that, you know, that center where they're going to be spending most of their day? I was really glad that you brought up these major arterials and gave me at least a better illustration of why they are so congested at this time, why they are so frustrating to drive on. And that part of your plan is to make our major arterials better. So I'm really excited about that. But I was curious that a lot of these major arterials are going through residential neighborhoods. And a lot of community members are frustrated that their neighborhood has, and their street in their neighborhood has turned into a mini freeway, so to speak. And so when it comes to this plan and making our major arterials more effective, yet also wanting people to be safe and comfortable and have more walkable neighborhoods so people can get from their doorstep to all of these modes of transportation. How does your plan hold in tandem these sometimes conflicting challenges, right? Making our major arterials that are going through residential neighborhoods more effective, and also keeping the neighborhoods walkable and comfortable speeds and all of that. So I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on that. I'm glad that this came up in the conversation.
I'll start, and then if Kareem, you want to. That came up a lot. And I think one of the reasons we tried to focus the mobility arterials on a handful, I think there's 10 or 12 in the corridor, was precisely that, right? Was to try to move traffic to major thoroughfares and then invest in those thoroughfares through efficiency, through technology or transit, and try to maximize the people moving in those arterials, right? To try to save the other arterials to some extent, right? The communities in those. Is it perfect? No. There is no perfect answer on that item for sure. Traffic calming and those type of things are embedded in those arterials. I think, this is meant to sort of be a step process. This isn't sort of the environmental document. That's going to be next for those places. There are models, but I think each one needs to we need to get into that next level of detail on a particular corridor and try to find those answers. Because maybe there's something you can do for 2 miles, but you can do something different in the middle, but maybe have more efficiency.
Sometimes it's block by block solutions,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
I'm just glad to see, one of my streets in one of my neighborhoods, Melrose Drive, right, is on this map, right, of priorities of major arterials that can be enhanced through this plan. So thank you so much. I don't know if you have anything more to add there, but I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you to the public for being here. I have a question because we as a council were able to come together and pass a new protected bike lane network just at our last council meeting. And so my question is, how does that get integrated into, this is the draft, so the final draft, right? How is that updated? And kind of how do the actions that we take as a council, how is that communicated to this document?
Well, hopefully a lot of that was baked in from day one, right? Because that's why we had the technical working groups, is to make sure that we were hearing firsthand from the city staffs about what was needed. And so that's one point. Second point is these are meant to be living documents, much like the RTP, right? The RTP is updated every 4 years. The world continues to change in terms of technology and people's travel patterns, right? Obviously, a great example with COVID, today's travel patterns are completely different than they were 4 years ago, highlighting why these plans need to be continually reassessed and thought about. So those are two ways. And the reality is, just because the plan is finished doesn't mean we don't continue to have those conversations as groups, right? It's meant to be sort of a point in time, and the conversation continues. So any good ideas are never going to be discarded.
And I know that we're going to have a conversation about the Inland Rail Trail, but I've had the privilege to speak with you all about it as well. And I really think that there's a great opportunity for us to connect the city of Vista to the San Luis Rey bike trail via Melrose. And so trying to work with Vista, the city of Oceanside, and potentially the county for creating a pathway for us here to be able to get to the ocean and use that fantastic bike trail. It's such a short distance that we really need to figure out, which I imagine if it's a shorter distance, it's also less money and a shorter time frame. So I just want to throw that out into the public record that I am 100% a proponent of that as we start to look at some of these major arterials that were widened and really disconnected our communities, especially where it intersects with safe routes to schools and stuff like that. I think North Melrose is a prime example of being able to take one of those additional lanes and provide a higher public benefit, whether it's a protected bike lane or a bus only or some kind of hybrid or whatever the case might be. I just want to ensure that I have that, I've made that very clear. I'm a huge proponent of that. I also have been a really big proponent of grade separation, specifically where there is a large volume of emergency services and first responders. So the grade separation that we need probably the most here in Vista is one here at our transit center, where Vista Village and Santa Fe intersect. We have one of our busiest fire stations right up the street, and I can't wait for us to have 15-minute headways on the Sprinter, but that also means that the little gates are going to be coming down, so it could potentially be very dangerous for our first responders to get stuck on their way to Tri-City Hospital, right? So whatever we can do as a city and as a region to be really competitive for a grade separation, specifically in that area, I think is really important. So I'm not sure what Caltrans's role is in that. Perhaps you can enlighten us about that.
And one thing I probably was remiss in saying in the kickoff, right? These studies are done as a collaboration between Caltrans and Sandag. And so the two folks you have today are Caltrans. The Sandag folk was on vacation, spring break today. So some of the things that are off-system that Sandag typically takes the lead on, we'll circle back with them. But I know the grade SEPs have been in a high conversation in the teams, and I know you guys have applied for candidate money to do studies, right? To do the feasibility study is a great first step. So I think that's a good example of working together to try to chase those funds, identify those funds so that we can do those studies.
Yeah.
Kareem, is there anything you want to add?
No, I mean, the Vista grade SEP has been identified in the project or in the document, so definitely it was identified. So
Is it one of the highest priorities in the corridor, grade SEP? Do you remember?
I don't know if we prioritized grade SEPs. I just know we identified them.
Is there an opportunity to prioritize grade separations?
Yeah, I think in the plan, geez, I think in the phasing plan that we had, the preliminary one, I think we did have just grade SEPs identified, but not which ones. And I think we wanted to leave that up to the jurisdictions to kind of work together and kind of determine which ones, are the most priority.
Let's we'll take that one back. We'll take that comment back and
Yeah, that sounds.
because we've got NCTD there and let us at least ask the questions. Right?
I just came from NCTD. I represent the city, and we were doing our strategic plan workshop. So great to know that we're laying down the fiber optic to help modernize the signals so that we can get to that 15-minute headway. It's a phased approach, right? So I'm really thankful for Congressman Mike Levin. I think he was responsible for that $7 million. But I would really like to push on a system to prioritize grade separations because they're very expensive, and I want it here in my city. And so I would say that the way to prioritize it is to ensure that where there is going to be a big effect to response times for our emergency services and first responders should be part of that prioritization. And that would mean that, here at Vista Village, that grade separation could be prioritized, and perhaps the one at the Nordal station. So, because I know our firefighters got to go over there too, our firefighter paramedics. So really important that we figure out a way to prioritize that, because there's a good amount of money, but we want to access it as quickly as possible before it goes away. And I want to ensure that we have good circulation for our emergency services. And then we can also bake into that better circulation for pedestrians and for cycling. Because one of the big issues that we have here at the transit center is that it feels like an island, and it will literally take you sometimes 10 minutes to get from the transit center area to our downtown. So being able to connect it better, I think is just going to be, it's going to help us reach our goals, right, projected out to 2050, so that we can get a higher amount of folks to have more mobility options. Is there a date for the final North County CMCP?
So comments have closed a couple weeks ago, and we hope to have a final in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Pretty soon.
And can you elaborate to the public what flexible fleets mean?
I'll do my best, but.
Will you start off and then
All right,
I'll-
so first mile, last mile, right? And we talked about how, 50% of the trips are less than 3 miles. And so what alternatives do we have than a vehicle? And if you don't want a bike, and so flexible fleets could be things like Fred's downtown, right? Or
EVs.
NEVs.
And Fred, and a lot of people, I know what that means because this is my world, but
Right.
can you explain what Fred is? Because San Diego has it, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, these are like jitneys, right? So they're circulators. So they're going to go over a certain track, a 3 or 4 mile track, not a literal track, but like a route. And then they're going to have 5 or 6 stops, and they pick people up. And sometimes they're a quarter, sometimes some cities subsidize them. But the idea is to connect the major O&D, such as a transit station. We talked about Sprinter not going to a major O&D. Well, maybe you have some type of flexible fleet to take the person from the station to that major destination. So, but they're generally 3-4 miles in diameter.
And
We consider EV bikes too, as well.
And how do some jurisdictions pay for their Freds?
That's a good question. I do know here, Sandag's been talking about different grant programs and having different pilots up and running. We had the one on the coast there, connecting Carlsbad to the business center there. That was a subsidized connection there for a while, and then unfortunately COVID took it out. But a lot of them had been regionally funded or grants.
Okay, yeah, and for some of those connectors, is that more like in the micro transit area? Okay, and some of those are considered low-speed vehicles or neighborhood electric vehicles.
Right.
And so we would need to have, as a council, we would really have to be proactive in building that network out, because they can only operate, they're street legal in California if it's posted 35 miles per hour or less, right, the street. So that's something that I will continue to advocate for my council, for us to figure out how we can connect our resources, whether it's the senior center, the civic center, our different Sprinter stations, the courthouse, right? Different grocery stores, right? We lost a Vons not too far from here that's really created this food desert. So being able to be forward thinking and look at where our roads are 35 miles per hour or less and where they're not, so that way we can create this really seamless way for us to maybe partner up with like Beep or something like that would look at innovative technologies to move people around with, whether it's an autonomous electric vehicle or something of that nature. So.
And partnerships with businesses, right? In Sorrento Valley, for example, the Qualcomms and the biotechs there have been talking about building flexible fleet systems to get to the Midcoast, as an example, but they were going to sponsor it. So there's a mix, right? There's
Right.
definitely opportunity for partnering.
Right, especially, I'm looking over at Council Member O'Donnell, and your district has a business park, right? And that would be a great opportunity for us to be able to connect the business park even to, the Buena Creek station, which isn't in our jurisdiction, it's in the county, but they've identified that they really do want to work on figuring out how to make that better. That's only 2 to 3 miles from our business park, right? So giving people more access to opportunity and reducing the cost of transportation burden from $10,000 a year because you have a single, you have a vehicle, that would be great. And my last question is, there's been discussion about, why don't we just widen the 78? Can you talk about what it would actually involve to widen the 78?
Yeah, so when, obviously right away. Well, the reason I hesitate, right, because part of this is, are we going to actually widen it? Are we going to use technology to try to move more people through the footprint that we've got? And from the state of California's perspective, we're not looking at widening freeways, VMT, legislation. And so we're looking for different alternatives. And so I think technology gives you the opportunity as we move along and vehicles become connected, you can move people a lot closer and you can move more people in the same space. And so we're very hopeful that we never have to widen the middle of the freeway and that there's other solutions there. We may add lanes, but maybe you don't actually add pavement. And so there's different answers. If we just widen, which was the original plan, I mean, you're talking, 24 feet on either side, you're into the frontage roads, you're into businesses and homes. And so there's a lot of good reasons. I mean, it's probably over $1 billion to do it. So there's a lot of good reasons not to do it and to try to find other solutions. I think just the impact to the communities would be, we'd probably all get significant pushback.
Right, okay, thank you. And I did say that was gonna be my last question, but I have one last comment, and that is, it would be great, especially because here in Vista, we have the 303 and the 305 that are being extremely utilized by our youth via the Youth Opportunity Pass, right? But one of the things that really sucks here in Vista is that we're stuck in the middle of the 78 corridor, and if we want to get to downtown, we have to either connect to the transit center in Escondido and take the 280 or the 235, or we have to connect with the coaster in Oceanside. Is there any plans for us to be able to have a bus rapid transit from here in Vista to San Diego proper?
We'd have to,
I don't remember the BRT routes. We'll need to get back to you on
we'd
that.
have to get
All
back.
right. I look forward to hearing from y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you guys again for the presentation. I'll try to keep my comments as quick as possible here with the allocation of funds. It was $8.6 billion, and I know we don't know who's going to pay for it. I'm just wondering, is there anything in the plan to make sure that North County is allocated like 20% of the funds that are paid in? Is there like a fiduciary agreement per se to say that, hey, when we do the upgrades, since this is how many of you are here, we're going to make sure we allocate that much funding to your particular corridor in order to implement these? So that's my first question.
So the CMCPs did not have a financial aspect to it, a funding arm. That was out of the scope of the study. And so, no, the plan does not address that.
Oh, no, I understand like getting the funding. I'm just saying, say that you got all the funding, right? Like say we got those billions of dollars. When we get that breakdown, where do those funds break down as far as allocation goes? Like is North County, if we gave you, $8.6 billion, is North County getting, I don't know, it's how many billions of dollars in our improvement projects per se?
Right. So, I mean, I guess historically, the region gets a pot. And
of course.
Historically, there's not been a formula distribution.
Oh, I know.
So
That's why we're working on the 78 right now, as you know, my friend.
But during points of time, each region got probably more than a fair share. For example, like 76 and 15 were all going at one time, right?
Yeah.
And then there's periods of time where, it's not so geographically distributed. But that's why that's a Sandag board question more than
I got
it
you.
is.
So that leads me kind of to the next question, which you might not know the answer to either, is I know this is a project that goes through 2050, and we do a lot of talking about, hey, I live in the hills of Vista. It's hard for me. I don't even know, Karina would tell me where my closest bus is. I guess it's over by Vale Terrace, by the park close to my house, you know. So I'd walk to the park, I'd jump on the bus, I'd bring it down. It's kind of impractical for some people who live in Vista to even get to the mobility hub areas. So my question to you is, what's the priority, you know, between now and 2050? Are we gonna fix, you know, you pointed out the boulevards per se, right? And we have 3 big arterials in here, you know, Oceanside Boulevard to Beaubier, Melrose, and Vista Way. Those were the 3 big ones that you pointed out. Hey, we wanna invest money in those because if we can keep people moving on those routes, we're doing okay, right? Well, one of those routes is Melrose. And like Councilmember Melinda said, we have problems with speed over there. It's a bunch of lanes. So my question to you is, when you're trying to improve those routes, what is your idea of improving them? Does adding more lanes to those routes improve speed and efficiency? Or is it a plan of we're gonna, you know, like they say, we're gonna have a couple of dedicated lanes towards cars, a dedicated lane towards a bus, and then a dedicated lane towards, you know, a trolley, a bike, a teleporting machine. I don't know what you're gonna do, man, but like what's kind of the plan and what's the priority for it? Because I know right now, most of us drive cars. I would love to not drive a car. I mean, it'd be cool to jump on a Fred and have it take me somewhere. Like you could live however you want. A Fred picks you up and takes you around. But what's the practicality and what's the time frame and the priority? Because as, you know, 2050, I'm gonna be pretty old. I might not even have a driver's license by the time 2050 rolls around. So I hope it's here by now, but what is the priority for the next few years? Like, hey, funding wise, we're working on obviously sinkholes on the 78, I know, but are we thinking, hey, we're gonna add another lane? Because since we don't have to widen the 78, you know, if we get funding, are we adding another lane that's a, you know, carpool lane or electric charge your car while you're driving lane? I mean, you guys have all the grand ideas. So that's my my next question to you.
Okay, so those mobility corridor or arterials, I would say none of them probably assumed a widening. Right?
Okay.
So they were moving more people through like a transit lane or using technology to make the intersections run better together. You know, some of that adaptive signals that we can do. And to move more people on the.
Are we going to add safer as well while we're moving people through?
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
If you look at like the next, what is called the next operating system and smart intersections, there are, you know, a lot of aspects when someone says a smart intersection.
Okay.
There's technology elements, active transportation elements because the intersections are really the choke points.
Yeah.
It isn't about adding capacity between the intersections. It's the intersections that always screw us up, and they're the things that have the highest potential for collisions as well. So I think that's really where the focus has been, is like, how do we make intersections work better?
Well, we actually have an area on that same street that widens and, you know, kind of loops, and it's kind of, I mean, it's dangerous, we'll say, right up, it's dangerous, and we left it there because the parking was such a necessity, so we don't have a steady stream of lanes that goes through there. So at some point in time, we're gonna need to determine, hey, if we're gonna close lanes there, do we close them all the way across? And then what do we use that for? And what does that do for, you know, movement and mobility? I mean, you guys have a tough job. I don't want to tell you how to do it, but I'd like to, you know, people want to get home, obviously. Time is a big deal, but safety is huge as well. And that's kind of the balance that we're trying to figure out as a council, is how we do it. So
We all are, you know, and Kareem highlighted those bundles. Those bundles are really meant to be our priority in the next 3 to 5 years, right? That's where we think big bang for your buck can be. One of the things that was in the bundle on the arterial system was this, I think it was like a $25 million intersection modernization in the corridor. And ultimately, we're going to need more than $25 million to do those key intersections there. But, you know, let's pilot some of those things and roll out some of these new technologies. That's something we could chase.
For sure. And Deputy Mayor Contreras mentioned grade separation. And, you know, I was unclear on what that was initially the first time I heard it. And it's like we're going to tunnel underground or we're going to put an overpass over the road. So when you talk about grade separation, it's obviously pretty costly. You know, I don't know if we're going to put an elevator in to elevate some trains up to like a top rack like they do in New York and go over Sinopolis and go back down at Mar Vista, or if you're going to tunnel underground and find a water table there or whatever. But it sounds like, you know, increasing the frequency of the, you know, Sprinter is definitely going to do something to traffic. We've all probably been sitting on Vista Village Drive when the Sprinter comes through. I see Sam, my traffic engineer there. I'm sure he's got some calls. And, you know, the more that it runs, the more apt we are to use it for sure. But also the more apt we are to have congestion in our intersections. So what Deputy Mayor Contreras said rings true is, look, man, if you want to increase the frequency it runs, make sure we have the infrastructure for it. We don't want it to be more of a hindrance than a help. And I know it's a lot of money, but if you're trying to move people from other communities through our community where they need to go, then let's try to make sure it's practical and doesn't affect the quality of life for everybody so much. So I'm a component for grade separation right there at Vista Village. Make it all underground, like, it's just, it costs money. And where does it come from? Pound on your electeds there. Get that done. So I guess we spoke about on Melrose. The plan on that is going to evolve, I guess, as far as if you what the lanes are dedicated to. And let's see, just make sure I didn't forget anything here. I guess the Bobier Oceanside Boulevard, we're going to talk about a lot we're doing there. 20% of population. Okay, so my question about the budget allocation, would that go to Sandag staff, I guess? Okay, because they would be able to tell me, hey, out of all the projects we're doing, it's $8.6 billion, and Vista's getting, $2 billion, North County's getting $2 billion allocated per se. Okay, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Most of my questions have been answered, but I do still have a few left. I would also like to see grade separation on both Civic Center and Vista Village. Civic Center I get caught on all the time from trains, as I'm sure everybody does, but two of these arterials actually run through District 4. So Sycamore and Melrose are high traffic areas. So having something in place to reduce traffic, and specifically those areas are my concern, would be amazing. But I see the numbers that you have on here, so 661,000 people. Does this study take into account the growth that we're going to have throughout North County? So I know that we're going to probably grow at like 10% over the next decade, and just quick math without compounding is, where did I put it? It's another 198,000 people added to this region. So is all of this taken into account as we're creating this time limit? Can I talk about that?
Yeah, the projections are in there. We use 2050 population. Now, I suppose we call this good news. The population growth is slowing significantly, right? So between sort of 2000, 2010, 2015, this corridor was definitely above 1% a year. But moving forward, projections say not just here in the corridor, but the whole county and the whole state, we're dropping to less than 0.5% a year. So for this corridor, I think the population growth was about 160 or 170,000 by the time we got to 2050. An additional on top of the 660.
Perfect. Like I said, most of my questions were already answered, but you did say something that kind of struck my ears. You said technology that has not been invented yet. Right. Are there things that people are assuming are going to happen, or that you expect to come down the pipeline that we're not aware of, or that they're working on now, that can be implemented into this plan to actually help alleviate traffic and make our transit options much better?
Right. So I think the easiest one everyone talks about is connected vehicles, right? Things like Tesla are at a very mid-level of what's possible with connected. But ultimately, when the entire fleet becomes even more connected, I mean, conceivably, you could run cars, 3 feet apart safely. Because they're just talking to one another. But the technology has to be there, and it's not yet. You're at, say, level 2, and you need to progress to level 4. But the world's working on it, and I'm pretty confident they'll get there in 10, 15 years. But not only does that have to happen, but the entire fleet has to have that. Now, what's most likely to happen on something like 78, you can get to these places where maybe 20% of the fleet has it. We could convert one lane into being a connected vehicle lane. And then 50% of the fleet gets there. We convert a second lane. So I mean, we don't have to be there all at one time. We can do it incrementally. The hard part is sometimes it's hard to know the pace of technology in some of those. We know they'll get there by 2050, but is it, we probably shouldn't count on it by 2030. So that's the struggle we have.
Yeah, I have a friend that still drives his 2004 Nissan. And so if I just go based off of what the state is doing with electric vehicles, you're talking at least 2050 before we have a fully autonomous state of vehicles. So it makes this plan more challenging. I support everything you're trying to do. I think it's amazing. But just for a realistic projection, I think that's where we're at.
So right now, a lane on 78 can carry about 2,000 vehicles an hour. If they were all connected, we could probably get to 3,300. So we could easily get another third. But then you got to realize where they're going to get off when they get off the freeway, right? So now the arterials have to handle connected vehicles. So it's not as easy as it looks.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the presentation.
I want to thank you for being here as well. I don't know if, are you involved with maintenance as well as the corridor director?
I am, no, Sean, that is Sean's Rizzuto. I think he's doing a fabulous job, but
We're certainly appreciative of the work that Caltrans did recently to renew the pavement on the Sycamore off-ramp, and I know there's more work scheduled soon on those ramps at the Sycamore interchange with 78.
let me put in a plug for two things as long as I'm here. In 18 months, we have a $100 million asset management job that'll be going through the entire corridor. So the problems that we see at the culverts on the west end, we just didn't get there in time. You already see some of the culverts. We had another culvert job that's already underway for the corridor. It's going to replace about 8,000 feet of culverts. That's underway and was supposed to fix the ones that failed, so we just missed it by a winter. But you'll see new paving on the freeway. You'll see some signal upgrades starting in about 18, 24 months, right?
Yeah.
And then the second thing, I put a plug in for Clean California. Vistas, we're looking at, or we are working on landscaping the Vista Village interchange there. And we have a contractor on board. Money's awarded, and so we're just negotiating with the contractor to get break ground here. And I would expect we'd break ground in 6 to 8 weeks. So we're almost there.
That's great. That's definitely a big priority for us on just about all of our interchanges here in Vistas, beautification and ways to control unwanted traffic, encampments, litter, and other blight. That's a big priority. The operating cost of $3 billion in the plan that you presented, over what period of time is that?
That would have been the entire plan, so basically
30 years.
2050, so 30 years.
Okay, 30 years. I wanted to highlight, because when I was sitting member of the NCTD board, and when we moved forward with that, I don't know if we called it a FRED, which I didn't know what FRED stood for, so I had to look it up. It's a free ride everywhere downtown. But we did have this idea. I think we spent about $12 million between Sandag, and we got some state money for it. I don't know if that was Caltrans money. It probably was, for that connector to the Poinsettia station. And, you know, I looked at that at the time. You referenced the idea of partnerships with business. And, of course, we see, like in Silicon Valley, we see big companies. I proposed at the time, and I got zero purchase on the idea, that we should go to Viasat, the largest employer in our region, and offer to do a cost share on a bus that would take their employees to their campus from some of the highest sprinter stations. If we were to work with their HR department, I bet we could figure out how to do something that would be good for everybody in the region. If we could take some percentage of the load off, it'd probably help everybody else. Certainly where we have giant employers that, you know, have 7,000 employees, it would make sense to try and develop some of those solutions directly. I don't know if we're actually working directly with employers. I mean, that's something for NCTD to work on, it's something for Sandag to work on, but it would be great to see all of our transportation agencies trying to figure out how to work directly. And I know I'm a little bit outside your wheelhouse at this moment, but I want to speak on that since we're talking about this. Just generally, I'd like to put a plug in for the carpool lanes that voters were approving when they approved the Transnet extension on 78. That may actually, I think based on the design, was going to add asphalt to the, or pavement to the 78, probably in the center lanes like we are presently doing on I-5, right?
You know, the problem with 78 is just it's an old facility, obviously. And so the median is narrower there when it was first built. The geometrics of it has a lower design speed because of more curves. And so it isn't as easy to widen 78 in the middle. It would most likely be to the outside.
So you could probably consume a little bit of the existing emergency lane and some of the center. I mean, there's possibilities there without actually expanding the current footprint of the highway and having to eminent domain a massive number of properties. I mean, it's like not exactly the end of time scenario to add those lanes that voters approved. That's something I'd like to see, because we talk about connected vehicles. I'd love to see us talk about what we're doing as a region. I, for a long time, have called for us as a region to reach out to technology companies like Google, Tesla, Uber, who are all the leaders in self-driving vehicles, and ask them, build partnerships, what can we do to be the global leaders in San Diego for autonomous vehicle technology, which I think has the true potential to solve the last mile problem. If you could get an Uber car and 2 or 3 people got in and went where they're going, that would be very efficient, especially if it was autonomous. It might even be more efficient than what we're doing now with mass transit if it wasn't autonomous. So I want to always point those out. You spoke a little bit about some of the maintenance questions I had. Of course, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate it. We hope that you'll come back and keep us updated. Councilman Green has one more question.
Yes, I forgot to ask about El Camino Real. So when it rains really hard, it floods over there. We've actually had ducks take residency up right under that bridge right there. And I know that we're fixing, the ruts in College and stuff right now, but I don't know if there's like a French drain system or anything like going in there. But do you guys have any plans on fixing the drainage there? Because the freeway closed before, not because of the sinkholes, but because of the river in the middle of the freeway.
You could be an engineer. We need you on our team.
Bro, holla at your boy. Nah, just joking.
So a couple points. One is the channel there, Buena Vista Creek. It's riparian, it's overgrown, right? Things have moved in. And I know Carlsbad, we had a meeting with them last week, City of Carlsbad. There are plans to maintain it because part of the problem is got to get rid
The
of
drainage doesn't come properly there? Okay.
Then the problem is the lagoon is a little bit higher than it used to be because it's also filling.
It makes sense. It's Carlsbad's fault.
So it's got no water to.
Did you hear that for the record?
Place to go.
Okay, awesome. So we'll blame it on Carlsbad. Thank you so
working on
much.
it.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having.
Okay, that'll bring us to our next presentation. We'd like to welcome Dale Newsel, I hope I said that correctly, from Sandag to present on the Inland Rail Trail.
Good evening.
Thanks for being with us.
Okay, it's showing now. Hi, I'm Dale Nugel. I'm a systems engineer at Sandag, and I am the project manager for the Inland Rail Trail Phases 3B and 4, which are in the city of Vista. And tonight I'll be giving you an update and some background on the Inland Rail Trail overall. So this map shows the proposed 21-mile Inland Rail Trail, which is a Class 1 bike facility that extends from the Escondido Transit Center through San Marcos, the county of San Diego, Vista, and eventually Oceanside. So it currently goes along the NCTD Sprinter tracks, and sorry. So it goes along the Sprinter tracks, and the first 9 miles were completed along with the construction of the Sprinter line, and so that brought it out to San Marcos in 2009. Since then, Sandag has been working on 4 project phases for the Inland Rail Trail. So it's the next 7-mile segment. And of these 4 projects phases, there's 9 different segments. So as I go through the slides, you'll see that as well, that there's more than just the 4. So you'll see a 1A, 1B, 2A, stuff like that throughout there. And then lastly, there is the future segment through Oceanside. And that one is being studied right now. So there's no definite plans to get that one constructed at this point. So a little history on some of the Sandag phases. Phase 1 started at North Pacific Street in San Marcos. There's about 1 mile segment between 1A and 1B. The next slide here, you can see that Phase 1B ended at the border between the county and San Marcos. Phase 2A, from Charamoya Drive to Buena Creek Road, that's about another 2 miles, I believe. And in that, went to the Buena Creek transit station and included a new bridge over the Buena Creek. And these are completed projects. I believe Phase 2 completed in 2021. Here's another segment of Phase 2B, Buena Creek to York Drive. And then Phase 3A, which is the last segment that has been completed to date. It went from the Vista County line to Mar Vista Drive. So moving on to Phase 3B, and this is one of the projects that I'm currently managing. Here it shows the section going through the Civic Center Transit Center. And you can see it kind of goes through and then around through the vegetated area there on the south side. And then ends on the southeast corner of Civic Center Drive and Phillips Street. And then Phase 4 will then begin across the street on Civic Center Drive and then continue up north over the tracks and westward. So keep going from Civic Center Drive over Guahomie and through Vista Village Drive. Continues around the SDG&E property and over to the Vista Village Transit Station. And then lastly, would then continue over to North Drive. So that would be the end of Phase 4. Past North Drive, you see a little segment there that's kind of purplish color. That's the half mile that was completed with Phase 2. So that goes to North Melrose Drive. So just to give you some updates on Phase 3B, this is a 1 mile segment or so between Mar Vista and Civic Center Drive. And this is probably one of the most challenging sections of the whole Inland Rail Trail, just because of all the elevation changes and the grading that's required to meet the ADA 5% grading for that. In this segment, we have 19 different retaining walls that will be built with all the grading, and just the access right now, we only have it at the different ends. So it's a narrow corridor, very linear construction. But right now the design is 100% complete, and we're expecting to go out to bid this summer in the July-August timeframe. And from there, the contract award, we're looking at ideally the end of the year, but it could take 6 months, so February, March would be the very last possible for awarding Phase 3B at this point. And this is construction engineer's estimate is $14 million for this 1 mile, so it is pretty expensive. And construction, is challenging. It may take up to 39 months based on the current access that we have. If the contractor can get an additional access in the middle, which we currently don't have, they could reduce that in half to about 20 months of construction. So we're putting that into our contract, that it's up to the contractor to try to get that additional access. After that is Phase 4. So this one is, the design is to begin in June of this year. And the design timeframe is expected about 18 months or so. And going out to bid, IFB anticipated the summer of 2025. The numbers for this one, don't have all the numbers yet. They're a little older. We're expecting 12 million to 14 million at this point, but with all the price escalations and everything, we are expecting it to go above that, and we are looking for additional funding internally just to cover that if necessary. And that's all I have on Inland Rail Trail. Any questions? Feel free to ask.
Thank you so much for that update. I appreciate you being here to talk about the Inland Rail Trail. I know that a lot of folks are really excited to see its completion throughout Vista. And I'm sure that we all have lots of questions for Sandag in general, but I do know that, this is your specialty, right? The Inland Rail Trail project. So
Yes.
I want to, make sure I focus on that. And my big question to start is, what is the intention of the Inland Rail Trail? Was it originally intended to be a recreational trail? Is it expected to be a commuter trail? How are people going to be using it?
It's a little of everything. So it's, a great way to get people east and west. A lot of exercise, obviously recreation, but children going to school. There's Hanalei School that is in the 2B section. Just making it a lot safer for people to, move around and then eventually get to the ocean from here. So it's a little of everything.
I think we kind of saw in the last presentation that, the Sprinter track is connected, right, to some of the larger corridors, but when people want to break off from the Sprinter or from the Inland Rail Trail and go into our downtown or, to a place further away from that, Inland Rail Trail, they could be, at risk of not having the same type of infrastructure as they do along the trail. So what would you say that, cities like ours and other cities that are hosting the Inland Rail Trail can do to kind of keep movement going, right? If someone is on the Inland Rail Trail, they're really secure. I saw, right, there's fencing on either side. But once they get off, right, we want them to go to our downtown. We want them to be able to visit our local businesses and, if they're there on a recreational basis, right, be able to enjoy themselves. And if they're there on a commuter basis, we want them to be able to get to work and go home safely. So what are some of the things that cities can do to supplement that infrastructure?
Yeah, I just think having great bike lanes on the arterials, either, great, separated from either bollards or a dedicated class 2 bike facilities would definitely help. Pushing that, better signage, maybe slowing speeds down a little bit or working on all the different, I know taking a lot of these trails, there's a lot of lights you have to hit. So working on the lights and the signaling to make sure those are really work well. I've seen a couple in the city where they have the special traffic light that when you press the button, it shows like the green bike symbol, and then you can cross, and it's more dedicated on some of these trails. So putting things like that in there would definitely help.
I've never seen those before, so that's cool to think about, right? That we can have additional signaling, right, where there's a flashing signal that says there's a cyclist, right, and that they have the right of way. That's great. So, and it sounds like, based on some of our recent work as a council, we are going to hopefully become more cyclist friendly, especially as more and more people are using this Inland Rail Trail. I definitely want to, speak positively about the work that we've been doing, because we are going to have protected bike lanes for the first time in Vista on some of our, major corridors and conflict areas. So that will hopefully help. Let's see, my other question was, could you speak to when the plans will be completed throughout the entire trail? Because it's supposed to go to the coast, right?
Yes.
So is there a timeline on that? I know that there's been challenges with the city of Oceanside's, even the planning portion being completed, let alone beginning construction. So.
Exactly. I haven't been involved in that, but from what I've been hearing, there has been a lot of challenges with the alignment and getting everyone to agree what's the best alignment for that. So that's still being studied. A lot of proposals are being tossed around, but that's the last I've heard, unfortunately.
Okay. well, I'm sure Oceanside wants it too, so hopefully they can continue to work on that. And then you mentioned looking for additional funding internally. And I just wanted to ask about prioritization, right? Sandag has like 200 different programs and projects that they operate, right, throughout the region. Big, breadth of activities that they do. Where does this fall on the prioritization, right, when it comes to planning, but also for funding?
They're very high overall. I mean, that's why we're going out in this summer. It was originally hoping to go out earlier, like April, but there's a couple other projects that are ahead of us. So there's like 2 or 3 projects ahead of us right now. But overall, we think with where things are headed and where the bids are expected to come in, we'll be safe to, bid this out this summer and have the funding to complete it and award it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you for the presentation. I will echo the statement that I know residents are very excited about this being completed whenever it gets done. So thank you for being here tonight. I just had a couple questions for you. How many people utilize the completed trail as it is right now? Do you know?
I can look that up. There have been some studies that our data science team has looked at. Might be more east of here, and not necessarily in this section. As part of the Caltrans CTC documentation, we had to get those numbers and where they were, on Santa Fe Avenue. That's where people are biking now and trying to get those numbers. I didn't look those up, but I can probably get those over to you.
That would be awesome. And the only other question I had, so when was the design for this completed?
It was completed recently, I would say about 2 months ago.
Okay, and so you kind of answered the question I had for you before, and the reason it's not going to bid for another 3 to 4 months is because there's projects that are ahead of it?
Correct.
Okay. That was all I really wanted to know because I am anxious and very excited to get this trail completed. I know it's been in the pipeline for quite some time. So the sooner we can get it expedited, the better. And I just want to make sure that we are understanding that once it is put out to bid and a bid is accepted, from the time it breaks ground, at best, we're talking 2 years, and at worst, almost 3.5 before it's complete?
Yes.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Sure.
Another thank you. Thank you so much for being here and presenting this inland rail trail. We get a lot of questions from the public about when it's going to be done because people really want to be able to utilize it for a variety of reasons. I spoke about this previously, and I'll just speak it into the record again on this actual item of the inland rail trail. With the Oceanside portion being up in the air, I want folks to be able to access the ocean in a faster time frame, and I would offer that where the completed portion that kind of dumps into where Beaubier becomes Oceanside Boulevard, on that North Melrose portion, we can really fast track this project while Oceanside's trying to figure out what they're going to do. If we're able to connect to Guajome Park County land with a dedicated bike lane that is protected, and then we can work with the county to figure out the best way to connect to the San Luis Rey bike trail. So I just want to speak that into the record for this item because it is a very short distance compared to that blue segment of Oceanside Boulevard, which I have no idea when that's going to be finalized, let alone funded, let alone constructed. So, if Vista's kind of on that cusp of being done, I really want to offer that alternative connection as a way to complete the idea of getting to the coast. Then, the more bike facilities we have, the better. Eventually, Oceanside will figure out, their portion of it. But I really think that we need to expedite just connecting the bike facilities that are already in operation. I really appreciate the answers that you gave for bettering intersections for bikes, and I think that's something that we can look at. I have concerns at the Civic Center transit station, bikes trying to cross there. So I want to ensure that we have our intersections are a lot safer for bikes on the Inland Rail Trail to make it over the intersection safely, since that intersections are where we see a lot of collisions. And the last thing I want to say, and I want to ask this as a question, the climate crisis just continues to intensify. And what that means is that not only are we seeing peak rain and then peak dryness, and then it's cold, and then it's super hot, there isn't a lot of tree canopy and shade on the Inland Rail Trail. And I have a real concern about that. So is shading the Inland Rail Trail, is that under the purview of SANDAG? Or would that be under the purview of a different entity or jurisdiction?
I believe that would be a different jurisdiction, unless, they ask SANDAG to look into that. But as part of the scope of, that I'm aware of, it wasn't in the existing scope.
Okay. And what would be the way that we could ask SANDAG to add elements to their scope that would be for shading the Inland Rail Trail to make it feasible as it gets hotter and hotter for folks to utilize that?
I think it's something that I can, talk to our designers on to see what it would take to put that in there. From what I'm seeing, especially this segment for 3B, there's a lot of retaining walls, so you have to look at the root structure and how those would grow, and would they eat into the retaining walls or into the asphalt? Do we have enough space where they can grow naturally and provide the canopy of shade that you're looking for? Or do we just limit that to certain intersections where we could have like a pocket park or someplace for them to stop and, hydrate and take a break and all that? But
yeah,
good question.
I think all of the options that you listed are fantastic, especially, unfortunately, you could run into a flat tire, right? And so are there going to be, I think we should plan not only to get this done in the way that we've designed it, but to really make it climate resilient for folks to utilize, and having areas for folks to stop. It's great when I'm riding the Sprinter and I'm going to Escondido, like I see families riding on the Inland Rail Trail, and it's fantastic. And I can't wait for us here in Vista to have the opportunity to do that. But I really want to ensure that as it gets hotter during some of our peak temperature times throughout the year, that we can have some kind of a shade component. My preference is natural shade, right? And what we can do to maybe get grants for native plants. But outside of that, even artificial shade, right, with the artificial canopy could be really important. But thank you so much, and I appreciate you coming to Vista and letting us know a little bit more about the Inland Rail Trail and when we should expect to be able to utilize it.
Sorry, last question. So you had mentioned that this is a high priority to get completed. What projects are currently ahead of us in the bid process right now?
That's a good question.
It is a good question, isn't it?
I haven't memorized the list.
Okay.
I think if you look at what SANDAG puts out the bid, you'll see that list.
Okay.
I think one is like University Bike Path in the city. There was the like Bayshore Bikeway, Chula Vista, I believe.
So similar type of projects.
Similarly, they're bike projects.
Got it.
So we definitely have a big focus on bike
I
projects.
just
right
wanted
now.
to see who was more important than Vista. So thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us tonight. We appreciate your presentation.
You're welcome.
Okay, that'll bring us to our discussion item this evening, our Transportation Mobility Workshop. Our traffic engineer, Sam Hassanen, will provide the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sam Hassanen, City Vista Traffic Engineer. Sorry. Just a brief background. At the January 24th, 2023 City Council meeting, the City Council directed staff to develop traffic calming plans and procedures, including the use of speed humps. City Council also expressed the need for a citywide multimodal mobility plan and also directed staff to hold a public workshop to further discuss these issues. First, I want to give a brief update on the ongoing efforts with some more specific planned completion dates for these efforts. First project is our Townside Complete Streets project, Phase 1, which is improvements to Townside Drive, West Los Angeles Drive, and North Santa Fe Avenue. The construction of this project will begin in May 2023, next month. And the Townside Complete Streets project, Phase 2, where we'll be hiring a consultant, going out to the community, coming up with improvements for residential streets north of or east of North Santa Fe Avenue. This plan is planned to be completed by the end of this year, after which staff will apply for the next cycle of the ATP grant program to implement the proposed improvements. Green bike lanes, at the City Council direction, to install green bike lanes at all intersections where bike lanes currently exist over the next 3 years. And that Phase 1 of this project will be completed in May 2023. Traffic calming on priority streets, also at the direction of the City Council, to install speed humps on 5 streets. This is planned to be completed by September 2023. Protected bike lanes, also at the City Council direction, to implement protected bike lanes on the city's major roads. This project is planned to be completed by December 2023. Traffic signal on Emerald Drive and Lewis Street, Timothy Place. This is for design and construction of the project, and the completion by March 2024. Intersection control on Beaubier Drive and Calle Jules, currently programmed for a traffic signal. Staff updated a concept for a roundabout and a cost estimate, and is tentatively planned for City Council presentation on April 25th, 2023. Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. This is a federal grant for $320,000, and this is an overall plan for safety in the city, and this is planned to be completed within a year, after which staff will apply for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant funding to implement some of the proposed recommendations of the plan. Comprehensive Transportation Sustainability Plan. This will take a deep delve into the city's transportation system, look at all the active transportation, connections to transit, city's major roads and arterials, and so on. And staff submitted a grant for this project, or grant application, to Caltrans, and we should be hearing in the next few months. Collaboration with NCTD on planning efforts. This is ongoing, where we can find common ground with NCTD to develop plans to improve transit use in the city, connections to transit, first and last mile, things like that. And then one of the first things that we did is we submitted an application to the Federal Transit Administration for a feasibility study for grade separation at Vista Village Drive and Main Street. And next, I will go into 2 specific items, or policies, I should say. The first one is the Traffic Calming Program. And the current Traffic Calming Program has a phased approach that consists of 4 stages that a neighborhood or a resident or a street must go through to get to kind of a more involved or a more developed type solution for speeding. And the City Council expressed concern that the current program is too complicated for residents to follow. So staff reviewed the program and made suggested edits for City Council review. That is in the agenda packet. And basically, the proposed procedure will give more flexibility in the selection of a traffic calming technique for a particular street. And the speed hump policy was the second item of discussion. And we currently have a policy in place that establishes criteria and procedures for the installation of speed humps. And speed humps have not been installed in the city for many years because of emergency response concerns. However, the fire department recently evaluated the impact of speed humps and will now consider their installation on local and collector streets on a street-by-street basis. As we went through the current policy, we also have other suggested edits that I will go through next. So summary of the other suggested edits is lowering the resident petition threshold from 75% to 51% to ease the burden on the residents, allowing speed humps on collector streets, which the current policy does not allow, allowing speed humps on streets with speed limits higher than 25 miles an hour, removing the street segment length restriction where currently there's a minimum length of a street segment that can only be considered for speed humps, removing the street grade restriction, which is a certain maximum grade above which streets cannot be considered for speed humps, removing the truck route and transit route restrictions. I have not heard any concerns in the past from truck drivers or truck companies or transit like NCTD about the navigation of speed humps. Removing the 40-foot maximum street width restriction where some collector streets that may be 50 feet wide may be considered for speed humps. Also removing the 3,500 vehicle per day maximum traffic volume restriction, and then changing the speed hump height range from 2 5/8 of an inch to 3 1/8 of an inch to 3 to 4 inches. And the next steps, we will receive City Council direction and the traffic calming and speed hump policies with the suggested staff edits, and if directed, staff will return to the City Council for formal adoption of the updated policies. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. We do have 3 members of the public that would like to comment on this item, so go ahead and begin with that. You'll have 3 minutes each. We'll begin with Brett Olson, followed by Barney Dresman. Yes, please come forward to the podium.
Hi, I'd like to speak to east-west access, for bike access. As mentioned, there's really no access to the coast along Melrose, going pretty much from Palomar Airport all the way to the 78. Deputy Mayor Carino, you mentioned connecting up to the San Luis Rey. I think I'd like to propose another option to look into. I know it's probably in Carlsbad, but there's only a 1 mile section, a gap in Cannon, that goes through the Calavera Hills. If we could have an improved bike path that goes through that preserve, that would greatly increase access to the coast. And second of all, every day going southbound on Melrose, the bike lane disappears because so many people are trying to turn right onto Faraday. And I don't know if there's a good solution for that. Maybe to widen the bike lane there, but from Sycamore to Sycamore to Faraday, you can't access the bike lane in the mornings. So that's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Barney Dresman, followed by Julia Shriver.
Hi, thank you for these discussions. They're really useful. I would like to also brush on the idea of Cannon. That is a road that doesn't go through. I know it actually is between Oceanside and Carlsbad, but Vista could have some influence maybe in trying to reopen the discussions to get that through. If we had Cannon going through right now, we wouldn't really be having the issues, particularly with the eastbound 78 being closed is just a complete nightmare getting home. I work in Carlsbad. I live on the corner of Eucalyptus and Tigertail, and so I want to just reinforce the concerns that people last week spoke about. We don't have these accurate data on the roads in question. I work in an environment where decisions are very much data-driven, and I have some concerns about installing speed bumps just because people think we need them. It would make more sense to me that we actually measure the problem, which you can do with radar speed signs that also collect data. The radar speed signs also have the added benefit of slowing traffic, and you have them up in various places, but you can put these things temporarily in places to try and slow people down, and then when they don't slow down, call PD to come out and you know, do some patrolling and you know, stop people when they're speeding. My feeling is that they're inexpensive, and they have these additional benefits, including the data. That first of all, if somebody makes a complaint, we can confirm that that problem exists. We can prioritize where and when we should station these, so that enforcement can get involved and then monitor if enforcement is actually effective at slowing the people down, or if we need to take further measures. And you can also relocate them. So you're not just sort of plopping one in one place and going, okay, that's it. You can move them around. So I think that would give you data to justify the expense of taking further measures like speed bumps or other traffic calming things. I'd like to concur with Mayor Franklin's remarks about enforcement as a useful tool. I think that it really is. It's flexible, it's effective. I would like to offer one anecdote that I think that it can work. I petitioned the city a few years ago to change the speed limit on Eucalyptus Avenue because we had people speeding.
Thank you very much. Julia Shriver, followed by Danny Garcia.
I'm Julia Shriver. I live on Vale Terrace, and the speeders that go up and down the street is very unsafe. And I know you guys are talking about maybe speed bumps on there, and it's up to the fire department. I've been told there might be a roundabout at the three-way stop, which I highly recommend. That would slow people down. And also down by the rec center. We've already had a death on that road by the roundabout, I think last year. So, and I also believe the sheriffs, if they could station there for maybe 3 weeks and just let people see them. The weather is getting better. I think it would change people's actions, the way they drive. Going on the backside of the Moonlight, there's no speed humps. Going up to Alta Vista Gardens, there are. Going down to the backside, there's not. And we were walking, the dogs, families were walking, and these kids were just hauling butt down there. So I highly recommend speed humps on the backside. I'm very excited about the bike trail. I would love to bike. I just won't bike in Vista. I can go in Oceanside. Even still, you have to be cautious on Pacific Street. I would love to see something on North Santa Fe going towards 76. Most of it, they do have a bike lane. But I agree with Council Contreras that they need something concrete. If I'm biking and that pole that is flexible that was shown here a couple weeks ago, I won't go. That is not gonna save me. It will maim me. If someone is looking at their phone, playing with the radio, speeding, drunk, high, whatever, it's not gonna save my life. If you want to get mobile transportation going, make it safe. Spend a little bit more money to have it done right, and you'll get people going. I would love to see something on the Sprinter, the bike trail. It'd be awesome to be able to bike from Vista to Oceanside where my business is. And also I have an electric golf cart, so it'd be nice.
Thank you very much. Danny Garcia, followed by Aya Valdespino.
I love this workshop. I think it's great for the city. I just had two quick questions. The first one regarding protected bike lanes. I think it said it's going to be completed in December. I was just wondering if they're going to be completed in segments, and if so, which are prioritized. And my second question is bus lanes. How likely is it for the city of Vista to implement bus lanes? I know Melrose and a little bit of Vista Way has 3 lanes of traffic. And I was just wondering what would be the likelihood of the city implementing some bus lanes on those sections. That's it.
Thank you. I have Val Despino.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ala Valdespino. A couple of things. This was a really great workshop. I loved hearing from Sandag and Caltrans, particularly because I am learning how to use my bike, and I recently got an e-bike. One of my biggest concerns is that I can't really connect really well or safely to the Vista Transit Center from where I live here in District 2, just because cars go really fast on Civic Center. And I really appreciate taking the look at Eucalyptus, because I live on Eucalyptus, and I really think that the chicanes that are going to be added and the painting, the additional striping is going to help, because if you visually narrow a street, cars will naturally slow down. If it's really wide, cars will go really fast, currently what's happening right now. But I was just wondering if the city was considering doing leading pedestrian intervals at intersections. I've heard that California passed some sort of, law about that at their freeway intersections. So I think the city should look into leading pedestrian intervals at major intersections here to, ensure safety for pedestrians. And then also East Vista Way and Townsite intersection. That is a very dangerous intersection. I've seen a lot of pedestrians almost get hit by left-turning vehicles on that intersection. And then also another consideration is to look at Hacienda Drive and La Tortuga, like that intersection and that whole strip for cyclists. There's nowhere for cyclists to go on there safely. It's a 40-mile-per-hour, 2-lane road on both sides. And if you just sit there and watch where cyclists go, they go on the sidewalk because they can't go on the road. There's no space. So I think the city should consider a road diet on that road. And thank you for having this workshop.
Thank you very much. Rachel Belden.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak briefly and for having this workshop this evening. I'm a resident of Vista, and I'm here to say that I support enhancements to our bike infrastructure. I happen to be a very lucky person who lives relatively close to where I work. I could, distance-wise, easily ride a bike to and from work. However, the few times I've done it, I felt really unsafe. Driving from my home just right up the road from here to downtown Vista. So as a person, I am very much in favor of improved bike infrastructure. Putting on my hat, for my professional hat, and representing the Vista Chamber of Commerce, I wanted to thank Traffic Engineer Sam Hassanin for attending the Government Affairs Committee meeting with the Vista Chamber today and giving a smaller, brief presentation regarding the same topic. Obviously, traffic and traffic impacts are a huge concern for Vista businesses, and I'm here tonight to just listen, and I appreciate all of the conversations and the improvements as we work to make things better so that people who either live and work in Vista or live in other parts of our county or even in Temecula and other places can get to their jobs here in Vista. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker is Ali Clendenin.
Hello, I'm Ali Clendenin. I'm a parent of 2 Vista Unified children. One's in 9th grade, one's in 1st grade. So I live in the Grapevine/Emerald Drive corridor that we've all been plagued with serious traffic and skinny lanes and things like that. Walking is a form of transportation. So sidewalks in these areas I feel are important because there are areas where there isn't even a curb. We have Grapevine Elementary, Bellamente, Casita, and Tri-City Christian. So we have hundreds of students in this area. Some of them actually do live in the area and can walk there, but they can't walk because it's not safe. So we have an e-bike with a broken ankle, happened recently on Emerald. A parent noted that, and then there was a fatality at Jonathan. So I just wanted to emphasize the importance of this area. I understand we're getting a light at Lewis, but further up towards Olive, we know that's really jammed over there and it's not safe. So I just wanted to advocate for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Melendez.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for speaking. I feel like we've already had such a great discussion with all the community members who contributed to this conversation. We're reviewing our traffic calming and speed hump policies, which is a really good first start to give community decision-making power to the public and help the community be able to self-determine what they want their built environment to look like. So I'm really excited that this is coming back to us. I believe I had been the council member, at least one of the council members, to make comments that the traffic calming manifesto that we have had previously was not only confusing, but extremely prohibitive, right? There were all these steps that I think should not be the responsibility of the public, but now we have, I think, a more reasonable traffic calming and speed hump policy. And I want to make a couple notes about that. So I think one of the gentlemen who spoke, you mentioned radar enforcement. And I just want to clarify that there is radar radar survey as part of the criteria for speed humps. So there's a checklist. It's not as prohibitive as it was previously, but now with 51% of residents agreeing to putting speed bumps in their streets, so long as they meet the criteria, they will be allowed to explore that. I also think that it is kind of meaningful progress that we removed some of the required conversation with our emergency services, and that being coupled with criteria requiring no more than one lane, I think makes sense, right? So in areas where there are 2 lanes, and we see those as larger thoroughfares and major arterials, it's expected that those are going to be huge pathways for first responders. But on these smaller residential roads that have 1 lane, if the community comes around and says, there is speeding, the radar survey supports it, they meet the rest of the criteria, they can have speed bumps installed in their neighborhood. And I think that that's going to go really far to reducing speeds and making our streets safer. We want to create spaces for pedestrians and cyclists, but we also need to make sure that if we're going to create those spaces for pedestrians and cyclists, that there are meaningful measures to reduce the speeds of vehicles that are just barreling down our roads right now. And I believe that one of the primary ways that we can reduce vehicle speeds and keep people safe, whether you're in your car or you're on the sidewalk or you're on the bike, is obstructions, right? Speed humps, traffic circles, those type of physical obstructions are not only incredible innovations and very industrious, and honestly, I feel very American of us to have an incredible built environment that protects people and continues to allow the free movement of people. But I did notice some of the other traffic calming tools in here, Sam. So I wanted to ask, when somebody completes the petition for speed humps, or not for speed humps, for traffic calming, what could be issued to them? Is it speed humps? Is it some of these other lines and kind of road narrowing strategies. So I complete a petition for traffic calming. What do I get from the city?
So I think part of easing the process is before even getting to the petition stage is for the staff and potentially with the resident or residents on the street to come up with a plan before even the petition, because the petition obviously is pretty involved process for a resident to walk around and gather signatures. So we want to come up with the proposal before we even get to that stage.
Okay.
So it could be anything from the toolbox, basically.
So let's say there's a resident, right? They come to the city, they want to, could they just bypass working with staff and submit a petition?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
But not ideal.
I don't, sorry.
Yeah. So maybe it's more about kind of an ideal model is there's a neighborhood that needs traffic calming. There's kind of a neighborhood captain in that area that can, have good communication with staff, develop some ideas and plans, and then before those are implemented, you have to get approval from the majority of your neighbors.
That's ideally how the process would work. We collaborate with one or more residents, come up with something,
Okay.
petition, then traffic commission, city council. And then I was going to say, not all the tools even require a petition. When we're talking about physical traffic calming, like roundabouts, chicanes, speed humps. But for the more lower level things like speed limit signs, striping, things like that,
Right.
those do not require a petition.
Right, some of the striping that create, I've driven on some roads with kind of, what is it, the perpendicular striping?
Yeah,
the
yeah,
short-
that's just striping. We just implement with a work order.
So
But,
that's
yeah.
where any resident can come to the city. And who do they contact? Is it the Access Vista app, right? So if they don't want to go through a petition process, if it's something like, hey, I think my street can be a little calmer if we had more striping, who do they talk to?
Mostly I get emails and phone calls directly. My name is on the website. And I think that's the easiest way so that they don't have to go kind of around. We get a lot through the city online request submittal system as well.
Okay, so
So it's almost like a split, in thirds. But I think, people, it looks like they find us easily, which is a good thing. So that before they even go through, petition or write them, long letters or anything, usually I get an email or a phone call or a brief request online.
Okay, and we can tackle a lot of we can use a lot of tools in the toolbox without even having a petition, right? Because it's just paint on the
Correct.
ground. Okay,
And a lot of times that process is initiated just simply with a phone call or an email.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. And I'm much more satisfied with the policy regarding speed humps. I think, like I mentioned, it's much more accessible to the public. It's not as prohibitive. And I'm glad that that's being recommended. I had a question about some other comments that were made. The protected bike lane ballards, there was a comment about Sycamore through Faraday on South Melrose. Do you know if South Melrose, if that area is expected to include green striping and ballards?
Big portions of the southern part of South Melrose, but I believe the specific comment was about southbound right turn from Melrose to Faraday. Some time ago, maybe 6-7 years ago, we put in this long right turn lane because there's very, very heavy movement of right turns in lieu of the bike lane. And I think that's what the issue is. And to get that bike lane back in would need physical widening.
Okay.
It's something we can look at. It would obviously, carry a cost, but it's something we can look at.
I wasn't super familiar with the area. I was just curious. Thank you. And let's see. Okay, I wanted to make comments about specific areas. So I'm happy with the updates to speed hump policies. And I want to talk for a moment about Olive Avenue and a mid-block crossing on Olive. I'm pretty sure Olive is one lane, right, going each way,
Yes,
right, the whole way down?
I believe so. It gets pretty wide on the west end, but I think it's still one lane. It's got like parking and two-way left turn lane, bike lanes.
So based on what we're speaking about now, it sounds like we can add some more striping down those really, really wide portions of Olive, because people are just gunning it, first of all. The cars are going so, so fast, and folks that live on that street on both sides, they're really frustrated. They're very happy with there's a stop sign on Bonita and Olive, and there was recently flashing lights included on the stop sign, and everybody's really happy about that, because drivers are like falling asleep and then they see the flashing light and they're like, okay, there's a stop sign. So that definitely makes our stop signs more effective, but it doesn't really help the situation when coming from Emerald all the way down, people are just booking it to that stop sign. So I would love to, maybe work with staff or, continue to bring things back to have a traffic calming effort on Olive, so that it's possible and safe to install a mid-block crossing. There are kids on the upper side of Olive that are walking to school at Grapevine Elementary, but there's not a legitimate place to cross, and there's no reason why we can't insert some strategic traffic calming and speed mitigation there. So Olive, I think, is a big issue, and it's got sidewalks, significant amount of sidewalks. We need to utilize those assets, but again, not just space for different forms of transportation, like walking is a form of transportation, but also slowing cars down so that people will want to walk and bike. Then I also wanted to make a comment about West Vista Way. That is another area where, and it is just very challenging right now because the 78 has been closed and people are utilizing West Vista Way heavily. But I think that West Vista Way is another corridor where we can look at traffic calming. There's no reason why West Vista Way needs to be a miniature freeway. It is a really great opportunity for us to have a better corridor where there's several bus stops along that corridor that can be enhanced. There's definitely a need for sidewalk infrastructure and speed mitigation. I got neighbors telling me that they're driving west on West Vista Way to get to their neighborhood. They're trying to turn onto Hill, or they're trying to turn onto many of the other streets there. And as they're turning, right, slowing down, putting on their blinker, they have cars going out of their lane and swerving around them. So we just have to slow people down so that people can reasonably move in and out of their neighborhoods. And I don't know if any of the obstructions that we're discussing would be appropriate in that location, maybe some additional striping in the meantime, but Olive and West Vista Way are areas in my neighborhoods that I really care about, and I would like to look at some creative and strategic designs so that we can move people around a little bit more safely. And that is it from me. I'd love to hear from everyone else.
Sam, thank you, and to all of staff for all your hard work all the time. I really appreciate everything you're doing. You had mentioned fire, so that they were now open to speed bumps on certain areas. Did you receive a report, or I don't know if there's anybody from fire here that could provide more information on that relative to the data they now have, since I know last time, I think we said it was from 2008.
Good evening, Council. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so is there a new set of data that you've received or looked at? And could you provide it to us if you have it? Because I know before we had talked about data that had been 15 years old or so relating to speed bumps and their impact on the engines and the ambulances that utilize, the damage it causes. So just wondering what might have changed that based on the data that you've seen recently.
We still have the concerns about our response times. We also have concerns about damage to our equipment. We did recently go out to La Tortuga, and we did some time trials with a fire engine. It is better data than what we had relied on in the past. Again, newer technology in the fire engines did allow us to go over them a little faster, but still at a safe speed. So we do not have a new report. We did take a comment from the last council meeting when this was brought up. We talked to some of our neighbors, and then we also spoke with engineering at length about the best possible way to accomplish both goals, maintain our response times and control traffic flow.
Well, that was my only question. I appreciate you doing that because
You're welcome.
it's helpful. So, as far as the bike lanes on South Melrose, I think specifically that what the gentleman had mentioned, Sycamore to Faraday, but specifically Oak Ridge to Faraday are probably, I've seen it backed up, and I'm talking people all the way against the curb, blocking anybody's ability to ride a bike there. And I know there's no bike path, is what you mentioned, but trying to install one there, I think would be beneficial. And then Cannon, I would definitely be open to putting a bike trail or some other method of transportation to open that up to Oceanside and Carlsbad, just to get to the coast. And as far as sidewalks are concerned, I would 100% agree with the comment that infrastructure needs for sidewalks are just as important. That is what the infrastructure package that we have passed at the federal level can be utilized for. So I certainly think that we need to, as a city, look into that as much as we can to get that funding. But beyond that, I also, I've talked to many people that ride their bikes, and a gentleman the other day was almost embarrassed to tell me, but he rides on the sidewalks because he doesn't feel safe even with the bike lanes where they're at when they're not protected. So that was my only comment. I appreciate all the work that's gone into it and all the speakers tonight, and look forward to hear what the rest of the council has to say.
Thank you so much, Sam, for the presentation. I want to say that I agree with all the edits to the speed hump policy. I really appreciate taking a look at that. I appreciate the fire department taking studying how to be able to do traffic calming, utilizing some of these physical infrastructure additions. So I'm glad that we were able to cross that bridge together and get to a better outcome, I think, for the entire community. As part of the speed hump policy, there was a discussion about radar. We are checking speeds, though, as part of the policy already, or not?
In the screening criteria, there was one criterion that dealt with that and is still in the proposed edits with the less number of points.
Okay.
So,
So we do have a way to, we are still, as part of the whole petition and ability to move through the petition, that is still going to be a consideration.
yes, it's one of several criteria that we'll be considering in that checklist.
Okay.
Some of these criteria we're suggesting to remove, which is I went over that list of things that kind of did not seem to be material really to the kind of consideration for speed humps, but this is one that we are suggesting to remain.
Okay, awesome. I would add that we reach out to folks because we have their contact information who have gone through the petition process and have previously been denied because at this point they may be able to get approved, which would probably be a fantastic news for those individual parts of our community. Okay, so I really appreciate the comment regarding speed humps on the backside of Moonlight, because I know that I personally, when I'm trying to exit from seeing one of our wonderful shows, even in a car, it can be really difficult because people are speeding down the hill, let alone when you're, taking a walk. I personally have seen vehicles exceeding a safe speed limit there. So I don't see any issue with adding speed humps there. I don't know if, it's our property, so I don't know what that looks like. Do we need to have a petition ourselves, or, is that something that we can direct staff to take a look at? But I think that could be an incredible asset to the community, especially because there's not a dedicated trail for walking. So people really have to utilize the same area that cars utilize in order to walk. You got a ton of people walking, right? You got people walking with their families, walking their dogs, walking by themselves, trying to power walk up that hill. So I really appreciate that comment. There was a public comment regarding bus lanes, and I am a huge proponent of bus lanes, especially in on corridors that we have restriped to have an additional lane. I think it would be great to study and work in collaboration with NCTD where it would make sense to convert one of those lanes to a bus lane, or if it could be a hybrid of like bike and bus. There was also a comment about pedestrian intervals at intersections. That's a huge concern, especially at some of our longer distance-wise intersections. I'm thinking about, folks that come from the transit center that are trying to get to our downtown. It's not very safe to do that. And, I'm thankful to be able to walk at a decent speed. And even when I'm crossing at Vista Village, I feel like I don't have enough time to get over safely. So taking a look at that would be really important. There was a comment about East Vista Way and Townsite intersection. That intersection is terrible. It is absolutely terrible. I know that we put the median in and did beautification, but now you have folks doing U-turns, and it's just not super safe. So I don't know if we can plan to make that safer, especially because that is the end of Townsite is a way to connect to the Conservancy Trail. So I want to ensure that our neighborhoods that aren't right now lucky enough to have open space available to them, that we can make it safe to connect to open space that we have. And that Conservancy Trail is incredible. So being able to kind of increase the access to the Conservancy Trail and any potential park that might be over there, I think is a high priority, should be a high priority. There was a comment about Hacienda and La Tortuga, 40 miles per hour and a road diet. I think that stretch definitely can have a road diet. It seems to be a little bit wider than what is necessary for the volume. I'm not an expert on traffic. That's just what I see anecdotally. So I would be very happy to take a look at that. Okay. And is there a possibility too, because there's a lot of traffic that goes through Faraday and South Melrose, but is there the potential to have a traffic circle there where we can have a protected bike lane, kind of like the example during our traffic calming discussion that we previously had next to Vista Community Clinic, where there was a dedicated portion for bikes to go through, where they wouldn't have to share the traffic circle?
This is in reference, sorry, to the intersection of South Melrose and Faraday Avenue. It's a very large intersection, obviously, with 6 lanes in South Melrose and multiple lanes on the cross street.
Sounds like we wouldn't need more right-of-way.
Yeah, detrimental to the motor vehicle traffic. But yeah, it's something we would have to think about and see what potential options could be as far as separating the bikes. But yeah, I mean, the physical space, obviously, is all dedicated now to the lanes plus the bike lanes. So anything additional would have to come from the motor vehicle lanes.
And as part of our funding that we're going to get to plan a safer Vista, are we going to be looking at that area potentially?
We're going to be looking at citywide, the safety action plan, but it is going to be more data-driven. So that's kind of a traffic safety focus. what would be great is if we also get the grant for the transportation, sustainable transportation plan, and then we can kind of have those efforts kind of go hand in hand, because the sustainable transportation plan is going to be more focused on the active transportation elements and probably lower classification streets like collectors and local streets. So it'd be good to couple those efforts, but the traffic safety plan is more data driven, so it's going to really prioritize based on where the collisions are focused or concentrated.
Okay. And for this other grant, when do we know if we get it or not?
It's probably going to be at least 2-3 months.
Okay, it's not too long in government terms. It's like tomorrow.
Hopefully, that we can have those, maybe at least not start at the same time, but at least at some point overlap. That would be a good thing.
Okay, awesome. I am 100% in support of a mid-block crossing on Olive. I think right now, if the only place that there is a crosswalk is between, what's that one road? Emerald and
I think
is it Highland? Or
Highland is the next. No, I think there's another stop sign, I believe, west of there. But there's a long stretch without any controls. I believe Grapevine is a big intersection.
Right.
And maybe just a point of clarification on the mid-block cross, and maybe since Grapevine Elementary is on Grapevine, maybe that would be a good intersection to focus on as far as getting pedestrians across.
Right, and is it possible to have a raised pedestrian crosswalk to make it even safer?
So on a street like that, with the speeds and the volumes and the width, that may be something that drivers don't expect, because something like that would require slowing down to probably 10, 15 miles an hour. I think we could look at other options because of the width. We could look at medians, flashing lights, things like that, possibly even a stop sign. I think that would be a good thing. I've heard about this intersection in the past, whether it's crossing or just even pulling out of Olive, making a left turn with the difficulty because of the speed and side distance. I think a stop sign coupled with some physical devices and enhanced crosswalks could be a good measure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a huge proponent. I know you all have heard this of making the distance of crossing a lot smaller, because that means that there's less potential for some kind of pedestrian situation where that could either be an injury or fatality. So I don't know if there's the potential to have a smaller distance for crossing, which then could maybe be raised. I don't know. So, but I appreciate taking into consideration Grapevine, because when it comes to safe routes to school and augmenting that with our traffic calming, I really think that should be a high priority for the city. And that's something that we can work with Vista Unified School District to identify and figure out potentially too in parts of our community that are disadvantaged, how we can present a shovel-ready project and figure out how to get funding for it. So let's see here. I appreciate Councilmember Melendez also bringing up Vista Way, West Vista Way, and specifically the bus stops. I mean, some of those are absolutely terrible. I see people waiting on the median, the little, concrete barrier between the freeway, and that's where the bus stop is. And every once in a while, you'll see that someone wheels out a chair and they leave it there. But I think that we could do a much better job on making better bus stops there, especially because that's a corridor to get to Tri-City Hospital. So I think we need to have a little bit more consideration when we're connecting different resources in the Tri-City area. I wanted to talk about Bobier Drive, and I added to the packet a conceptual, and it sounds like this is going to come back on the 25th, right? But just the Gaia Jewels portion. But there's another portion near Bobier Elementary that there's a concept for 2 traffic circles on Knapp and Dorsey Way. again, this is, I think, a way to prioritize safe routes to school. The speeds are excessive on Bobier. It really is unacceptable to have so many schools, and similar to Emerald, right? When you have a lot of different schools within a corridor and the speeds are excessive, it is just not a good mix. And I think, again, we should prioritize traffic calming efforts with safe routes to school and figure out, especially this area may qualify for additional, funding, grant funding. And do we have the ability to put this up? I just want to show the public what I'm talking about. And council, you have it in your packet. Thank you so much, Kathy. So what we're looking at now is, and I do want to say that on the agenda report for item number 7, which is intersection control on Bobier Drive and Gaia Jules, it does state that the project will design and construct either a traffic signal or a roundabout at this intersection, and the proposal will be discussed at a city council meeting in the near future. However, I do recollect that we had a majority support on the council to put a traffic circle, so I am a little perplexed by the language used in the agenda report stating that it will either be a traffic signal or a roundabout. So do we need clarification that we do have a majority that wants to move forward with the traffic circle there?
I believe so. I apologize for the confusion. That's why I think we kind of worded it that way, because it's currently programmed for a traffic signal, which is approved, in the CIP budget. So we would need that specific direction. And one thing actually we were considering is that instead of coming back on April 25th, we could get the direction tonight, because we do have the concept for the roundabout updated and the cost estimate. It's a little higher, the cost, but that would be a separate action when we come back with a CIP mid-cycle update, where we can redo the program and the funding and so on. But if there's direction tonight, then we wouldn't even have to come back on April 25th.
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready to provide direction tonight if we still have the same majority, if not a larger majority, that wants to move forward with this design. This is something that I dug up from, 2022, right, last year, because I have really been working internally, and I appreciate the work that we've done internally to figure out how to move the Gaia Jules intersection from a priority 6 to now an elevated priority, and it looks like we were able to do that. But this design, as you can see, just makes it so much safer for folks to cross. Right now, it is really unsafe to do that, and my fear is that, an intersection is, a traffic signal is better than nothing, but it doesn't force people to slow down. And what I anticipate will happen is, just like we've all seen the lawlessness on our streets, is that someone will not stop at a red light, and pedestrians will suffer because of that. I think it is appropriate for the council to move forward with a design that we've already conceptually done in-house, and the distance that a pedestrian has to cross is significantly shorter with a type of proposal like this. So I just believe it's a lot safer. This is an incredible way to connect residential to commerce. As far as direction goes, would I need to provide a motion, or can I just open it up to my colleagues and then continue to have my time to speak? Get support that way? What's the best way for me to go about?
Best way would be to make a motion.
Okay. Perfect. So before I do that, again, I just want the public to see the other slide. There we go. So you can see that Beaubier Elementary is on the lower right-hand corner. This portion is all downhill. If we were to move forward with figuring out, one, how to fund this, right, and put it in our CIP project list, just imagine the difference that this is going to make on Beaubier. So I know that we probably do not have funding to do this at this time. Can this, because I want to be able to have a larger discussion with my council. I think we, in my mind, we had already given direction to staff about the other traffic circle at Calle Jules. But is this something that we can bring back to discuss on the 25th? If we give direction about the Calle Jules tonight, then maybe we can substitute what we were going to talk about this.
Sure, that's council's pleasure.
Yeah, and if it's not, then I will put it on there because I want to talk about it. And, I've had a lot of my constituents just talk about the same thing in this area. I mean, folks do not feel safe turning from the residential streets onto Beaubier Drive. It really is a nightmare situation. And again, this is, in line with what I'm saying about traffic calming measures that are also going to intersect with safe routes to school. Okay, so, and we don't need a motion on all of these, just specific direction?
Just the Calle Jules intersection, since there's some additional costs, we would appreciate a motion and a vote on that.
Awesome. Okay, well, I will go ahead and make a motion that council accepts the East Beaubier Drive conceptual improvements at East Beaubier and Calle Jules as presented on this document that we shared with the public and with the council. Thank you. That's it.
If I may interject, I think on the policy suggested edits, we may need the direction just that the edits are acceptable, so then we can come back formally with the actual council policy amendments.
Okay, so I will amend my motion since I still have the floor to include staff's recommendation on the speed hump policy edits. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate staff's report because I didn't hear 100% that we had consensus. I did hear a consensus say, please bring it back so we can look at it, because I had never seen the roundabout plan at the last meeting, nor did I know what the cost of it was. And I don't know that any of us knew what the cost of it was or what it looked like. So as far as I knew, it wasn't officially approved, but it was something we discussed. So I think the staff report was 1,000% correct, because if we watch back the tape, it said, I'd definitely be willing to hear more on that. So that's where it was at. So I think that staff report was right. So I always don't want to bag on staff if I don't have to. This is a fantastic opportunity and a great concept here. Now, questions that I have, because I am a traffic light guy on this street. I live about 300 yards, maybe 500 yards away from East Vista Way and Beaubier, or, you would say it's actually Foothill Drive that I live on. So I drive up in this road several times a day. As you know, there's a stoplight at Anza Avenue. There's a stoplight at East Anza Avenue. There's a stoplight at Vista Way. There's a stoplight at Goodwin, and there's a stoplight at South Santa Fe. So there's a history of stoplights from Santa Fe all the way through to Vista Way. The 7 years I've been on this council, every resident that I've talked to has asked for a stoplight and a crosswalk there. I understand the movement to go towards roundabouts, and quite frankly, if I thought that we had the funding to put these roundabouts right here at Knapp and Dorsey, and you could put a roundabout at both of the Anzas and put a roundabout at Calle Jules, it would be much more flowing, it would be much safer. But at the same token, we already have stoplights in those places. crosswalks in those places, infrastructure in those places. So in my opinion, the most conducive and practical improvement to this particular intersection is a stoplight with a crosswalk. So I personally don't like it here. I also don't like that we take traffic down from what it looks like from 2 lanes to 1 lane, especially after looking at Caltrans and Sandag's proposal saying that Bobier to Oceanside Boulevard, Melrose, and Vista Way are these big streets where we got to move a lot of people through. I want to move them through as safe as possible, as quick as possible to get them home for their families. And adding another crosswalk and stoplight at Calle Jules is no doubt an amazing improvement. So questions that I have for you, because I wholeheartedly do not agree with the roundabout unless it is a wholehearted conceptual plan, because why would I put one roundabout on one side of a street and then put 2 more in a totally other district on the other side of the street? It's not a cohesive plan. The other thing is people can just as easily not see a roundabout and fly over the top of it and flip over it and total a car, and a sheriff's deputy could be following right behind that roundabout and flip their car and end up in the hospital, kind of like what happened last weekend. So it's very easy for drivers to lose attention, and especially if you're trying to keep people from 2 lanes to 1 lane, the bottleneck that keeps coming on this road that's supposed to be arterial is a big deal. So for me, I don't think it's a practical improvement, so I definitely want to hear more about it. So cost-wise, what's the additional cost to have that roundabout there?
Yeah, our current estimate is for $715,000, and we have $550,000 currently programmed for the traffic signal.
Okay, so it's not that much more. It's 100 and some odd.
Yeah.
$165,000 extra dollars for the roundabout. So I didn't know it was going to be $165,000 extra for the roundabout. I thought they were going to be about the same cost. Does that include all the raised medians and bulb outs and everything within that design?
That's everything that is shown, yes.
Okay, and if we decide to go to this design of roundabouts, because it is kind of like a wholehearted design, and I've been to Europe, I've driven all over different countries. Roundabouts do work. They do slow, they do make it happen, but it has to be a cohesive plan all throughout. That's why we have 3 in a row on Paseo Santa Fe, so that we could slow it. I initially only wanted 1, and then I was like, keep 2, and the 3 is what we stuck with because that's what works. So the other question is, knowing the cost on this, is it practical to think that we can put roundabouts all the way down this area and make it to where it is a cohesive roundabout type of road where traffic flow can stay steady through there and things? And what is, if we did put roundabouts at all those stoplights, what does that do to our connector streets between like Vista Way and Oceanside Boulevard and stuff like that? Because they're all going to be yielding to the traffic rolling down Oceanside Boulevard.
Yeah, but ideally it would be kind of a stretch of road rather than specific spots, and that would just transform the environment of the street as a whole, kind of like what we see on Paseo Santa Fe. Obviously, the cost would be the biggest factor.
Astronomical?
Yes.
Is that a good word for it? Okay.
Yeah, we would be probably, even removing traffic signals costs money on top of building the roundabouts. So we'd be, talking in the range of, 715 is what we're talking about, Bobier and Calle Jules. If we're removing traffic signals and we're talking into the future, probably with cost escalation, that would be probably estimated $1 million each intersection.
That's something we could get grant funding for, though, federally, right? If we incorporate it with Safe Routes to Schools, possibly?
I would say this would be probably not
a priority project.
It would be tough to justify this one, and it would need all these grants and need a lot of planning efforts. So this is, these sketches you're looking at are just kind of staff-driven, where we asked one of our consultants, hey, sketch this, for us.
Yeah.
We would need a massive plan and effort, kind of like we did for Townsite, where we go, consultant, community meetings and workshops and so on, and come up with this overall kind of comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I get it. And, the other thing I'm wondering too is, how much, before we actually install this roundabout or this stoplight, whatever we decide to do, are the residents, within a certain amount notified? Do we have a hearing on it? And do we need the same type of signatures you would need for this, hey, where you want to 75% of people need to approve this in your area before we throw it out or change it? Or is this something that, hey, a council can just make the decision to do, whether it meets or not guidelines, you know what I mean?
Yeah, this could be just council direction. Again, it depends what the process kind of takes shape. If it's where we want to go after grant funding, again, we want this much bigger planning process.
Of course, yeah.
Our consultant, we invite everybody along the corridor and the neighborhoods, to the north and to the south, kind of again like we did for Townside and Emerald. These workshops that 50, 60 people attend after we send notices to the entire neighborhood, and then we come up with this report and drawings and estimates and so on, and we pursue grant funding. But again, for an isolated location, like just Bovier Calle Jules, in council direction, I think would be adequate to proceed.
Okie dokie. And I guess that my only other question that I have on that bad boy there is, as far as the future plans, like if we do approve this, is it something that traffic engineers would recommend that we go with the concept of roundabouts to kind of calm traffic on that whole street? Because that's the thing is, I don't want to put a stoplight there. I'm going to have to get rid of later to put a roundabout in. And if that's the direction the council's going in, the city's going in, is to put roundabouts up and down all of our arterial roads and take away extra lanes and add bike lanes, that's okay. And that's what we need to know as a council planning forward. But at the same token, I've never seen just one roundabout go in on a road that is a pretty widely used arterial road and have it funnel down to one lane. We see the funneling on Melrose where it goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane and back and all the trouble that causes. Having just one roundabout at Calle Jules right there just seems like it would cause a bottleneck and kind of a funneling issue for traffic. I don't know, like from a traffic engineering standpoint, like what do professionals recommend? What do you normally put here? Is it a practical spot for one or?
Yeah, so ideally, it would be a whole corridor of improvements.
Okay.
However, specifically this spot, just the way I evaluated it, visibility is very good. That's one of the big things. So,
Okay.
Because like you said, driver's expectancy, what do they expect, a signal or a roundabout? But in this case, there's a long kind of stretch where drivers would be coming
down the road from
they would be able to-
Anza there.
Yeah, and the lane reduction in itself is kind of, it gives the feel to the driver. Something is changing here, so they might be expecting something else. So
And then it also looks like you're taking away parking all the way down that area. Can you go back to the slide of the roundabout there? So how much parking are you taking away for the roundabout and then kind of up there? I know all the people in the apartment complexes, they park right there on the right. Are they going to lose any of that parking right there, or is that all going to be still able to park there on the road?
Yeah, no, there's no need to remove the parking other than at the intersection.
Other than the corners, right? Just those little areas right there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I look forward.
I was going to say in anticipation of future roundabouts too, that, like you said, it makes sense so that we don't put in a traffic signal, come back later with a bigger plan and have to remove it.
No, and also from a lighting standpoint, it's pretty well lit there, right? We don't have to add additional lighting or anything in order to really draw attention to it.
We'll look at that too if we need additional lighting too.
Okay, so just whatever the cost is on that, I want to make sure I know. And then I know that we have some sheriff's deputies in the back there. I had kids go to Beaumont Elementary School for 15 years of my life. I say I spent 15 years at an elementary school, and I'm still not smarter than a 5th grader. But in the 15 years I stayed there, I got to say I probably only counted 2 times that there was traffic enforcement over in that neck of the woods. And there's kids that walk there. I know that we've taken several field trips down to the library and to City Hall, and walking on those roads, Eucalyptus, Tiger Tail, Beaumont's real tough. So if I could get the sheriff's captain, I think Captain Boyce, and maybe our traffic Sergeant Mr. Cottrell, who is a old school Vista sheriff actually, and back on the traffic beat. Thank you, sir. Because we talked about, costs of things. And I know we had a little debate about traffic cops and what the cost was going to be of a traffic patrolman. And as opposed to really adding another traffic deputy right now, how hard would it be? We've heard from residents in District 2 there on Eucalyptus and Beaumont pretty regularly about enforcement. What's kind of the policy if I say, hey, we've had people come in here and say, hey, we want to put people on Eucalyptus Drive for 3 weeks in a row. And that was one of my questions is, how long do you actually staff your law enforcement at a priority intersection or a priority street for when it comes to traffic?
Right, so the best answer is it kind of depends, but let me give you a good scenario is that we're, in the traffic division, we're completely complaint driven. Okay. So a good scenario is Sam Smith, say, lives on the corner of X and Y street, and Sam Smith knows that people drive up and down his street really fast, and they roll the stop sign in front of his house, and it drives him crazy. So he'll call in, and I talk to him, and I said, okay, I'll send enforcement your way. So then the deputies will go out and they'll enforce in that area, and generally speaking, 9 times out of 10, when the deputies do that, they'll go out and they'll come back, hey, Sarge, I wrote 2 citations in an hour and a half. I'm gonna go to my normal spots. And so is what I'm talking about is that, say, South Melrose, the 2000 block of South Melrose, a lot of traffic. We get thousands of cars through there a day. Deputies are riding people at 117 miles an hour. They're gonna go to the areas where they can have the most impact, for the best traffic safety for the city. And sitting sometimes at a stop sign in front of someone's house that drives them crazy is not the best idea for the city, because stopping someone that's doing 117 on South Melrose Drive is gonna save a life or several. So we are complaint driven, and we do go to those areas that people call in for, but the deputies do need to enforce the areas that have the biggest stats in accidents and speeding and all that together. Does that?
Yeah, and they also they have like a, I don't know if you want to call it a quote or whatever, but you want to make sure that while they're out there enforcing traffic laws, that they're actually finding people breaking the law. So what you're saying is you want to have your traffic deputies in a place where the most people are breaking the law so that we can curb their behavior in those pretty much high arterial roads. I mean, we talk about Melrose all the time, 117 on Melrose. I hope not, but hey, who knows, you know?
It's happened a few times recently. And to kind of answer your question even a little bit better, the deputies that are out there that are specifically enforcing traffic violations are the deputies you see on motorcycles.
Gotcha.
And Vista has 3 of them. So spread that out through the whole city, and you can see that it's stretched pretty thin. Deputies that you see in an SUV, they can enforce traffic violations. However, their time is almost entirely taken up with 911 calls, and that's their primary job, is to respond to emergency 911 calls. If you see a deputy on a motorcycle, they're not responding to 911 calls unless it's something very critical. They are out there 100% of the time writing citations.
Yeah, I was a little confused on that too. Every time I saw a cruiser behind me, I think people get confused. And don't get me wrong, if you're breaking the law and there's a cruiser behind you, they're going to pull you over. I've pulled you over in a ride along before as well. But you're right, their primary job is to go from spot to spot, and you know that computer pops up like crazy. So kind of what I was trying to get to is this particular area, and even like the Rancho Minerva area in my district, we have a lot of problems with a lot of kids and no sidewalks. A lot of people driving fast and no sidewalks. A lot of people driving fast and no enforcement. So as opposed to just like one particular stop sign, I kind of feel like it's kind of the area over there. I mean, the Beaumont, Tiger Tail, Eucalyptus area, it's this little triangle that people kind of cut through. When Vista Way's backed up, you take Vale Terrace, you hang a right on Alta Vista, hang another right on Alta Vista, left on Coventry, right through Beaumont, through Eucalyptus, you know? So it's a cut through to get you all the way to Civic Center without having to mess with that Vista Way traffic. So people are taking it. And we had a lot of people here last week that they would actually take Alta Vista Drive, which is that super windy road, all the way across to Santa Fe to avoid everything. So there's a lot of, you know, I wouldn't say they're driving 117 because the roads aren't conducive of it, but the speed limits over there are low. And when you have so many kids in the mornings and in the afternoons, I really feel like if there was more enforcement over there, even just for like a 3-day period where you say, hey, every day, you know, when you know people are going to be there, obviously. They're driving their kids to school, and as much as we'd hate to slow, Jen down when she's driving Joe's 4 kids around to school, you got to be, cognizant of the other kids in the area. So I would say kind of before school and after school is when traffic's real bad there. And that's when you get people kind of, not paying attention, throwing all caution into the wind to pick Bobby up at the school because they're 15 minutes late. And those are the people that are going to cause the accidents and could possibly hurt somebody in my neck of the woods. So I know it's not going to be a 3-week station thing, like I think Ms. Shriver said, is can we station them on Vale Terrace for 3 weeks? But again, Vale Terrace is one, like they peel down. And the Safe Routes to School program we have is $6 million. It's not going to get funded anytime soon. So enforcement, I think, is our big key. Moving on to that, we never got like a real number on like, hey, if we wanted to hire one more traffic deputy, say we have 4 traffic deputies now, what does that look like financially?
So I have 2 examples. I have a motor officer and a traffic deputy.
Okay.
So a traffic deputy, the initial startup fee would be $397,000 and some change. And then a startup fee for a motor officer would be $367,000.
And what would be the recurring charge annually to the city?
So for the traffic deputy, the following year after the vehicle's already purchased would be $229,000 a year, and that increases a certain percentage each year.
The CO, whatever, based off of our contract with the sheriff's department? And what about the motor?
The motor is actually more expensive with an ongoing cost of $245,000.
$245K. Okay. And so that's what we need to look at is when we're looking at allocating funds. You know, I mean, obviously having other traffic deputies out there, but you know, if we're spending, how much is it per speed bump, Mr. Sam?
About $3,000 to $5,000.
$3,000 to $5,000 per speed bump. So if that's a lot of speed bumps, right? I'm not a mathematician. I'm not going to try on that one, but it's a whole lot of speed bumps at one deputy. So I get it. The other thing is we talked to our fire department about their response times and things like that. And I really do appreciate you guys going to La Tortuga. I know the area over there. I think it's in Councilwoman Melendez's district where they have those speed bumps in that private, community over there. Are those the same exact speed humps that we're looking at putting in all these other areas?
Yes, and those
designed
are
identical to those.
Those would be on the public portion of La Tortuga Drive, the big broad ones, kind of, which is similar to Apollo, Cortez as well.
Okay, nice. And those aren't too, from your guys' experience, they're not too tough on your vehicles. They don't slow you down. I know you guys probably think of them as ramps when you're in code 4 or whatever you call it.
So I've checked with our fleet coordinator, and he's not concerned about it.
Perfect. Okay, and from your last question for you, and I'll let you go. Paseo Santa Fe, we just had an instance with a deputy, and I know that was a car chase of somebody who was out of town, didn't know the roads, came up on it. Do roundabouts, like having this concept, because Bo Beer, I've got tons of complaints. I have Shantae, the actual manager of Handles, was here last night serving ice cream to the kids, and she lives on West Knapp. The back of her road goes to Bo Beer, and she says people fly down there, and seeing the concept for the roundabouts, it's great. Love to kind of flow it down and help this, routes to schools. From a sheriff's standpoint, is that something that you guys can work around, maintain response times, and not?
I definitely think it would delay us to a certain point, and also for like a high-speed chase like you're referring to, it would definitely be a concern of ours. We were actually discussing that in the back there when you guys brought it up. So
okay,
I think through normal operations, it flows pretty well, and I don't think it would delay us much during normal operations, but during the high-speed type instance where we're going code 3, it would be a little bit of concern.
Could it be a resource for you as well, though? You're rolling down Bo Beer and you're like, hey, I got this roundabout coming at Calle Jules. We're getting them here, boys.
As long as they're respecting the rules of the road.
If they're running away from you, I'm assuming they're not. Anyway, all right. Well, I really appreciate your time and your expertise in it. And thanks for giving us the numbers, because it really gives us perspective as leaders on, what fund allocation looks like. So thank you so much. And welcome back to Vista, Sergeant. Nice to see you.
Captain and Sergeant, before you leave, did we get an answer? Because I had asked a question about, and I had heard the number years ago about how much the city keeps when we write a ticket.
It's very rough because it depends on the citation. It depends on how many citations that person has, their record, and all that kind of stuff. But roughly speaking, it's a little less than 10% of the citation.
What is generally a citation for, let's say, 10 over the speed limit?
Oh, okay. So then that goes into a whole nother ballpark. Again, it depends on the person, their record, and all that kind of stuff. And the commissioner that you go in front of a judge, but it could range $400 to $1,000.
Do we know what the total amount of revenue we had for our 3 traffic deputies was for the last calendar year?
So a typical traffic deputy, if he's not occupied with other things and he's just simply out there writing citations, will generally go through at least a book a day. So that's what they call it, a book a day. There's no quota that's against the law. You can't
tickets in a book?
A 20. So you can't have any kind of quota, obviously, in California state law, but generally a deputy can easily do that within a shift.
Okay, thank you very much.
If I may, the amount that the city's received, and we're asking for some more detail about the breakdown, because we just have sort of this larger amount, it had been around 300,000, and last year was down to about 120,000. So that was for the fiscal year that we received.
Not per deputy total.
No, total 120,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just
But
have-
we're trying to get more information. I'll look at that too. When we
Awesome.
Captain, okay, so you said we had three, tell me again the difference between a motor deputy and traffic deputy?
And just to correct you, we have 3 motors and 7 traffic deputies, so a total of 10. So the difference, I mean, you want to go into the difference?
So it's a traffic deputy is primarily responding to all traffic collisions or anything traffic related. A pedestrian in the roadway, a traffic collision, some kind of hazard, something like that. Something that generates a 911 radio call is what a traffic deputy will respond to. A motor deputy does not respond to radio calls. They simply go out and write citations.
Got it.
If I could add one more thing, we have 3, and if you were to add one more, it then makes it so that I can break those 3 up, and they could work in different spots of the city at the same time, because they do what we call cover each other. You have to have cover. And so it makes it easier logistically to have put them in different spots, because then they have partners to go different places, because there's 3 right now, and they generally all work the same area at the same time.
So you're saying they work better in pairs of 2?
For safety reasons, they do that, correct. 4, correct. So if there were 4, right now we have 3, but if there were 4, then I can break it up and say, put 2 on South Melrose and put 2 on Beaumont or on Tiger Tail. You kind of see what I'm saying?
Yeah, sounds like teams of 2.
It's how the sheriff's department works, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so the 3 motor deputies are part of the 7, or they're in addition to the 7?
There's 7 traffic deputies, 3 motors, so that I have 10 deputies on my team.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent.
I just have one more question for you, Sam. Not you guys. Thank you so much. Fantastic sheriffs. Bravo. We talked about the Faraday Melrose. Really familiar with that because I go out to Carlsbad, Business Park all the time. As opposed to adding a bike lane and jackhammering and stuff like that, is it possible to do some signage on Sycamore and make the traffic go through the Brookhaven Pass East, or the Brookhaven Pass Eastbrook Street there, that little development? Because the truth is if you just turn right there at Chevron and then left right there at Brookhaven Pass, it takes you right out onto Faraday. And you go through a residential neighborhood, you're not on Sycamore, you're not getting ran down by cars, and it'd be safer. I mean, from a city, could we do city bike route, say, hey, because since we got rid of the bike lane there, we literally got rid of the bike lane, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay,
Just
so
right at the intersection there.
yes, so maybe as we approach Chevron, you put a sign up that says bike lane ending, bike route, turn right. And then when you get to Brookhaven Pass, Vista bike route, turn left. And then that takes you right to Faraday. There's no amenities between Sycamore Drive and Faraday right there. There's a business park there that's, the office place, but there's no restaurants or anything. So I think if the biker's just trying to get from Sycamore to Faraday, that would be the safer place, and that would be a much more cost-effective way of redirecting bikers so that they're not on Sycamore. I guess if they want to take Melrose straight all the way to Palomar Airport, maybe we direct them around the other way. When you get to Faraday, turn left to get back to the bike lane. So
The only thing I would caution on that is that we have a long history of complaints from Brookhaven Pass residents, that neighborhood of.
there's speed humps in that neighborhood, though.
We still hear them, and
I understand.
I'm just saying the impression that directional signs, even though they're for bikes, it might give the impression to the residents, oh, cars are going to see that.
Well, there's no
We're gonna get more of
homeowners
them.
association in that area, right? And those are city
We would
roads.
have to go through that, obviously.
I'm sorry?
We would have to, obviously, if there's any proposal like that, we would have to run it through the
The
neighborhood.
CCNRs up there. Okay, so they have conditions coverage. Okay, I felt like instead of jackhammering the road and expanding the footprint, nobody wants to take away people's property. It is a really easy path from a bike standpoint. not from a walking standpoint. So that was that. And then I also just wanted to say I do support a crosswalk at Grapevine and Olive. And if it was like, lit with flashing, a controlled crosswalk or something with a reflective, crosswalk sign or something. You got a lot of people. And I know they live in Oceanside there on the seasoned streets, but that's Vista Unified School District. And they're all walking right across Olive, Grapevine to get to that school. So thank you so much. Look forward to hearing from council.
Final thought on the revenues. I am aware that we were short-staffed on our motor deputies. Isn't that true? Yeah, for the last couple of years, so, or at least the last year or so. I believe that's the reason why we were down on our revenues. So if 300,000 is a typical number, so you take 100,000 per deputy, so you can take $100,000 off of the 245,000 a year for the motor deputy, you got 145,000 a year. And, citations, enforcement of the law has an effect on driver behavior. So I think that's, and now learning that we have 3 and they work better in pairs of 2. Just saying, council, I think we might want to consider adding that 4th traffic deputy. Councilmember Melendez.
Thank you. I am certain that during our previous meeting, I expressed that I support a traffic circle here on Beaubier due to it being a traffic calming mechanism and being comparable in price. So I'll go ahead and second Councilmember Deputy Mayor Contreras' motion, and hopefully we can complete this discussion so that it doesn't have to come back to us. I wanted to clarify, though, there is a streetlight on East Vista Way in Beaubier. Is there a streetlight on Anza and Beaubier?
Both Anza Avenues have traffic lights.
Okay. Great. So the reason why I support traffic circle as a singular object, and why I am not thoroughly convinced that we need 3 or more roundabouts in a row in order to effectively slow cars down, is because of the incident that happened this weekend, and this notion that obstructions will be truly the only thing that convince people to reduce the speed in their vehicles. Of course, enforcement will get people to reduce their speeds. I was on Melrose recently, and there was a deputy monitoring, and everybody was driving so slow, and it was so nice. Everybody was on their best behavior. But obstructions are really important too. And this weekend, over on Sunday, there was a high-speed chase from Fallbrook, went all the way down into Escondido, right? Somebody had a stolen vehicle, went all the way down to Escondido, came around the 78, got off on Sycamore, got onto Santa Fe, and the thing that apprehended the suspect in the end was not law enforcement, it was infrastructure. And that high-speed chase, that stolen vehicle, and that suspect was no match against the concrete of a traffic circle. And high-speed chases aren't happening every day, all the time on our streets, but people are running red lights, they are violating traffic laws, and it's a lot harder to run a traffic circle because it's a giant concrete block that is an obstruction that's going to keep people from running those lights. So I'd be really excited to see how this traffic circle performs. I believe that we can mitigate speeds, reduce speeds, and make our streets safer with a singular traffic circle, as evidenced by, the first traffic circle that this suspect came upon when he entered Vista. It was just that one traffic circle on Paula Vista, and that was enough to stop him. So I really think that obstructions are the way to go to get people to slow down. We've just had enough. I've honestly had enough. I talk about this with residents in my district every single day. We are so tired of people running red lights. We are so tired of cars just barreling down the road and having no care about the community members around them. So if we need to improve our built environment and put some concrete in the middle of the road and you still keep the flow of traffic. People they don't have to stop. People are happy to see a traffic circle because they don't really have to stop. They can keep going, and they don't have to worry about slowing down for a yellow light or trying to catch the light before it turns red. They can keep going, and less people are going to get hurt that way. So I support the singular traffic circle. I also wanted to make a comment about the bottlenecking on Melrose. Green mentioned that there might be a concern with bottlenecking because it goes from 2 lanes to 3 lanes to 2 lanes to 3 lanes again. And one of the challenge with that bottleneck is that it happens right at a stoplight. So instead of traffic being able to continue on, people are stopped right at that 2-lane portion. And then it's just like backed up because the light, you can't go forward. If it were a traffic circle, it could bottleneck, and then they wouldn't stop. They would keep going, right? So I think that, for me, that illustration, I just wanted to remark on that because I am constantly on that street. And one of the most annoying parts about it is not only does it bottleneck, but it bottlenecks to a red light, and then you're just sitting there in this annoying bottleneck, and people are trying to speed down that zipper to like beat you to the end of the merge, and it's just super hostile. So I definitely support that. And in regards to a traffic deputy and a motor deputy, is it possible to convert a traffic deputy to a motor deputy? Is that an option? Would anyone be able to share? Thank you for coming back down.
To actually make a traffic deputy a motor deputy, like the price of it, I don't know the background of that. It takes a lot to put into a motor deputy. The training that goes behind it is way more than what a traffic deputy.
That's why they cost a little bit more.
It's right. So the timing of it, I can't just go back to the station and say, hey, deputy, Vargas, you're now a motor deputy. There's a lot that goes into that. So the training is between the time you select that person and then they're 10-8 or ready to go, several months.
In addition to the equipment, right? The vehicle that they're on, right? Is
Correct. It would
different.
a new motorcycle. Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to do my due diligence and ask that question.
And I'll let the sergeant chime in if I'm incorrect here, but motor officers are also limited as far as schedule goes. They can't work into the early morning hours because of the inherent risk of being on a motorcycle that late. So taking a traffic deputy out of the cycle or schedule would really hinder our ability to do traffic enforcement into the night hours.
So what are the hours that a motor deputy can operate?
There's no exact time. It's fatigue that we look at. So you don't want to be on the bike when you're super fatigued. Okay. Generally, a motor deputy works from about 6 o'clock in the morning. I hate to give this out, so there now everyone's watching. But generally, it's the busy times of days. It's the time when you see a lot of traffic out there. They're going to be out there 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning until rush hour at night, and then generally they're going home. So you can speed after that time. But if the traffic is really bad, that's when we plan to have them working.
And in the times where they're not working, it's the traffic deputy that is available to respond to those 911 emergency calls, but in the absence of a motor deputy, will be observing traffic. Is that correct?
So yes, every deputy has the ability to monitor traffic and to stop someone and cite them for a traffic violation. It's just not feasible to have them do that all the time because of the time that it takes, because they're busy with other more high priority things. Does that make sense? They're responding to someone that is being assaulted, or there's a DV or something like that.
Certainly. And could you explain a little bit more the duties of a motor deputy? I'm sure that there's probably a lot to go over, but I know that they observe traffic violations. And could you expand upon that?
So they strictly write traffic, California Vehicle Code violations. They can do a lot more than a regular deputy can because they can get around a lot quicker. They're a lot more maneuverable, and they are able to catch up to vehicles when and the SUVs that we drive are just not feasible to do that. So you can split lanes in a motorcycle, you can accelerate a lot quicker in a motorcycle, you can do a lot more in a shorter period of time. And that's why the motor deputies are strictly out there writing citations, because that's what they are really good at.
Okay, thank you so much. I would be supportive of looking at increasing our motor deputies. I think that the way that they're split 2 to 2 would allow them to be in one part of the city and another part of the city. I've had a lot of residents express that they want more enforcement. And based on there being 3 now and they all have to work in the same area, it's actually not a very efficient use of resources because they all have to be in the same area, which can be good because there's a lot of coverage in that one area, but then there's the concern that other areas are just completely missing coverage. And that's what a lot of neighbors' complaints are about. At the same time, I don't think that enforcement or surveillance are going to be the true solutions to calming traffic in the long run. I think that our built environment and our infrastructure are going to be the ways that we make our streets safer. But people are violating traffic laws, and we do need to stop them when they do that. So, great discussion, and I seconded your motion, and I'm good to move on.
And I just want to say that I remember the traffic calming workshop maybe differently than you all. I mean, I don't know if this is verbatim, but even Council Member O'Donnell said, I will offer my support so that you have a third. So I'm not trying to be mean to staff, but I will tell you when I think you're wrong. And I think you're wrong on this one. I'm pretty sure we had a majority at that point. It's totally okay. And I want to bring to life a little bit of something that was discussed while I was talking about moving from a traffic light to a traffic circle at Calle Jules, which is this safe streets and roads for all that we got. And our traffic engineer, Sam, said that even though we have traffic signals along Beaubier, when we do the planning to have safety throughout the city, when we're looking at traffic, that there's a really high probability that this, and that's not verbatim, that's not what you said, but I'm paraphrasing, that the plan that would come forward to us would probably demonstrate that along Beaubier, it would be ideal to have traffic circles. So I just wanted to bring that into this conversation. Yeah. And as I said before in the budget workshop under a different captain, I really don't think we have enough traffic enforcement. I honestly don't believe that we do, and I appreciate all the questioning that has gone into the point of getting this information that we only have 3 and that they work better in pairs. Because, yeah, people definitely are on their best behavior when there is a motorcycle traffic, a motor deputy. And they're also a little bit harder to spot. The revenue portion of it is interesting. Maybe we can make it illegal for some of these apps that tell you that there's a speed trap. I think we could probably increase our revenue that way. It's terrible, I know. And you know what? It's not always accurate. So sometimes I'm slowing down for no reason. No, I'm just kidding. So anyways, I am 100% open to having that conversation, but I will note that looking at these figures, within 2 years of having an additional deputy, we could probably add a traffic circle somewhere. So just trying to keep those two. And a traffic circle is forever, and it's a one-time cost, maybe with a small reoccurring cost if we get cars hitting them because they're going extreme velocities during a high-speed chase. But in any case, I just wanted to bring these things up. Thank you.
When we're talking about Mountain Pass, I know that you get a lot of the same phone calls and emails that I get when it comes to that stretch, but do you think they'd be opposed to what you're saying, to having a bike path that would go through there as opposed to trying to add one on to Melrose?
This is kind of a first thought that kind of went through my head when I heard that. Just knowing the community there and talking to them over the years, I don't think they would want to see anything pointing towards their neighborhood, because we would obviously have signage for a bike ride directing the bicyclists to go that way, which would be visible to the drivers as well.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have a follow-up question for you, but if Captain Boyce, if you both would come back down really quick, I should have just told you to stay up here. Sorry. Right. I would just sit in one of those seats when you're done. So first, I want to apologize and make a correction from a comment I made last council meeting. One is that Encinitas does not have a program like that. What they have is a no-through street in that area, and it drastically calmed the residential area because they had law enforcement for people that did not live in that area that were cutting through, and that's what they were citing people for. So Sam, I would ask you, and don't go anywhere because I do have questions for you. Sam, is that something that we could do in that area to try and calm the traffic? Because Mountain Pass seems to be a very vocal community as far as a lot of people, and I believe them because I've seen the traffic on Melrose. Our doctor for my wife is in Encinitas, and that's the way we take. Is that something that would be feasible to do in that neighborhood and other neighborhoods in our community to try and calm traffic?
Yeah, we actually have a policy in place on restricting access on streets, which we've actually implemented on Cypress Drive off of Monte Vista Drive, a little street that's very low volume. And we've actually worked with the residents on Brookhaven Pass to gather a petition from affected residents in the area, including, I'm trying to think of this, the side street that's off of Brookhaven Pass, which is, I think that part of the neighborhood is kind of not in favor because they're not on Brookhaven Pass, but they still want to keep the access coming down, coming out at the bottom of the hill, coming out into Faraday. So we haven't received kind of that positive feedback that we need from the neighborhood that that's something they want to do.
I will come back to you on that one then at a later date. Gentlemen, first off, thank you for your hard work, everything you're doing. One of the locations is Shadow Ridge, eastbound of Live Oak. If you could send some people over there at some point, I'd really appreciate it. But I did want to ask you, so just quick math, if we had 3 motor deputies, correct, on this one?
Correct.
Okay, so if we have 3 of them, 20 tickets per book, so it's 60 a day times 365 is 22,000 per year. How many get thrown out of court?
That is a number that I would not feel comfortable giving to you.
Okay, that's fair. You can give it to me, not in a public hearing, I understand.
Deputies are very successful in court. So not many tickets go to court. I would say a very small percentage of them. So if a deputy writes, say, 30 tickets during his shift, I think he's very unlikely to even get one of those that go to court because they only go to court maybe 2 cases a week.
I've never gone to court.
Hundreds of citations a week.
Yeah, I don't go to court because I know I'm going to lose.
So to answer that, even if they go to court, they're not losing in court.
Okay. So based on that number, $7.72 is what we made on every traffic violation that we wrote last year. Adding another deputy, while I know it would increase the cost to the contract, do you have any idea? And Clerk Valdez, you said it was 300 and...
So over the last several years, it's gone down. It was originally budgeted about $300,000, but we're trying to get clarification about what all that includes. It may include some red light cameras as well. So,
Okay.
or not red light cameras, I'm sorry, red light running as well. So I don't know if that's motors or if that's traffic.
Well, and the mayor had mentioned that we were short on deputies last year. So were we paying for deputies we didn't have to service Vista, or what did he mean by that?
The traffic unit, no. So is what was referred to, I believe, Joe, I think you said about the motor deputies, or was it?
It was Mayor Franklin.
Mayor Franklin. Is what he was talking about is that there were 2 motor deputies, longtime Vista motor deputies, that retired. And so, like I said, it takes a long time to get someone to replace them because there's so much training that goes into it. So there was a spot or a time when there wasn't any motor deputies working. We had one, but there was a lot of time that he was training the new guys, and so he's not out there writing citation when he's training. Does that all make sense?
Well, from a safety standpoint, I wouldn't want one deputy out there trying to cite individuals doing 117 down Melrose. So I can appreciate that. I will tell you that I would be very open into exploring adding another deputy for traffic violations. I think that it would be very useful here in Vista to look into and perhaps add. So aside from that, just trying to see if I had any other questions for you gentlemen. And I think that is it. So
Let me add some context to something really quick. The deputies use the apps. As soon as they pop up on there, they move. No, they have all the apps.
It's good. I appreciate the hard work you're doing, so thank you.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. I got a question for you.
I have two other things. So just quick math for Councilmember Green. It's 132 speed humps throughout the city for one of the traffic circles. And Sam, if the council would be agreeable, I would love to explore a complete street at Longhorn and South Melrose, right outside RBV. I know that it is impossible to do a complete 6-way crosswalk, but if we could do a 4-way diagonal from each side, or a 5-way rather, with 2 diagonals from each side, and then the 3 that would go, north to south, and then west to east, and then south to north would be wonderful. And that is all I have.
I like your back of the envelope math. I'm a big fan. But just to set the foundations mathematically, a motor deputy is working 4 12-hour shifts in a week?
Correct. Well, it's 4 10.5s.
Okay, 4 10.5. Yeah. So you get 4 working days in a, so you got 4 times 50 instead of 5 times 50. And then how many days scheduled out in court and for training?
It's about, they go to motor training, it's about every 3 to 4 weeks, but that's only 1 day, say, out of a month.
And how many days in court?
Most of their Monday mornings is spent in court.
Yeah.
And then they're out in the afternoon.
So pull 2 working days a month out for court, and then a couple of training days, and you're getting down to...
Did you do the envelope math?
Well, I was doing
If you're going to come at me, I mean, bring
I was
your
doing the same
numbers.
math as you, but I knew it was fewer shifts than you would think.
Yeah.
Based on how they schedule them. So
I can appreciate that.
Councilmember Green.
Thank you so much, and thank you guys again for being up here. I don't think I have any more questions for you. If you just want to sit in the front row, just in case somebody else does, you're definitely welcome to. First of all, what a fantastic idea at Longhorn and Melrose. I graduated from Rancho Buena Vista High School just a few years ago, actually. And yeah, very dangerous intersection there. And that's where all the kids cross. They pick up the bus right there on Melrose. And man, it's crazy. You just see a herd of kids coming down that road. So the safer you can make that, the better. I just wanted to ask you real quick on the roundabout. I totally understand Deputy Mayor Contreras' reasoning on that, and I agree with it. Like I said, I don't want to build a stoplight I got to tear down and put a roundabout in eventually. Is it feasible to think that by putting one roundabout here, in all reality, we could eventually look at this like, hey, this is the first phase of slowing traffic, because you got this, the Grace Presbyterian Church has a school right there, a charter school right there. And then you also have the continuation school, the Vista Visions Academy up on the left and Vista High School. So there are 3 schools right on that road right there. So something that's feasible, that this could just be the first step in kind of mitigation for the whole street, right?
Yeah, it could certainly be part of a longer-term vision for the entire length of Beaubier, really. And I mean, it could be a kind of a longer-term effort, obviously, with the cost, but this could be just a first step.
Yeah, and I would think too, I mean, from a roundabout standpoint, I mean, it's your times where you don't have people waiting on these side roads and turning the lights red, or they're on a cycle and they just turn red and nobody's sitting there and you have to stop. It could inevitably, once it's all actually done, improve traffic flow. So I get your logic. I understand it. I didn't love it by any means. But, you know, I got to look at the big picture. You know, Sandag's plans for 2050. You know what I mean? So if this is something over the next 10 years, we might be working on that. So I like that. I also wanted to just, I don't know if I need to add another motion, but I wanted to direct staff. I think I've heard enough from our council members up here, and we've heard enough from our deputies and just our community. So much lawlessness and running red lights and, you know, just traffic violations. So I'd like to direct staff to at least look into what the financial ramifications would be of adding another traffic deputy. And I mean, I'd like to add one, but obviously making sure that's something that we could do. So if I have staff's or council support, I see we have a couple other councils still to chalk. I'd like to make sure that collectively we at least point staff in that direction to see what that would look like and what type of, you know, what is the not back of the envelope math, but how many tickets are they writing to offset the annual expense? And, you know, what's that worth to us? So
We'll bring it back as part of the budget discussion, if that's okay.
don't even need to make a motion. Okay, sounds fine.
Thank you. Originally, I was pressing my button to speak because with these new terms of motor deputy and traffic deputy, I think I may have said that I support adding another traffic deputy, but I meant motor deputy. So, and I think I heard you made the same mistake. I think we're all orienting ourselves around motor deputy, right? So definitely in support of that. And I did have a question, though, for you gentlemen. Thank you. So last year, there was a gap in coverage because we had 2 folks retire, but we need multiple motor deputies to cover one another, and that's how they operate. So in the case where there was just the one individual motor deputy operating, how was he able to perform his duties when there weren't other motor deputies to cover him at the time?
So a lot of the time it was me, and then when it wasn't me, it was another traffic deputy, and when it wasn't that, he was training a new motor deputy.
Okay.
So if he wasn't actually in Vista training or writing citations, that was because he was training the 2 motor deputies that we currently have, Brett Fuller and Nick Yale.
So when he was on duty, we still provided him that proper coverage, either
correct.
through yourself or another traffic deputy, kind of pulling a traffic deputy away from their duties to provide coverage for him.
So we have a saying that, you know, deputy safety is paramount. It's number one. And so he wouldn't go out and work if it was unsafe for him to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I just was curious about that. And I think that's it. I'm ready to move forward.
By the way, I'd just say, and maybe you can nod your head if this is true, but I have a friend who's a motor deputy in Carlsbad, and he was pretty stoked to get that position, and it was very competitive. So there's a lot of competition. A lot of officers want that coveted opportunity to ride a motorcycle all day. Thank you. Let's see, our names are changing here. Deputy Mayor Contreras. I'm sorry, Councilmember Melendez, were you next?
Yes, I'm sorry. I just wanted to also throw my support behind enhancing the crossing at Longhorn. I went to RBV as well, and it definitely needs to be more student-friendly over there. So thanks for bringing that forward, O'Donnell.
Deputy Mayor Contreras.
And I also wanted to add my support. This goes in line with what I'm saying about traffic calming and safe routes to school and really prioritizing the intersection of those 2 strategies to make our community safer. So I appreciate you bringing that forward, and I know the students are going to appreciate you advocating for that. So thank you.
Okay, seeing no other discussions, we've got a motion for the speed hump policy and the roundabout at Collier Jules and Beaubier.
I have heard from residents in the area that they would prefer a stoplight, and I'm not sure yet about the road diet there, and I kind of have to agree with Councilman Green about the holistic approach to this stretch of road. It's actually a really nice stretch of road right now. I know we had a fatality there, and I think we do need to implement traffic control to make it safer, and I will support that. As far as the 51% threshold, I think that should be higher. Speed humps on collector streets, I'm not for that. Speed humps on streets higher than 25 miles an hour, I'm not for that. The grade restrictions, segment length restrictions, which are for sight and visibility, I'm have serious concerns about that. I honestly do. The truck route, I have residents that complain to me about trucks that are off the truck routes, they're on their roads, and we've enforced on that recently. And so we're asking trucks to stay on their route. I have a concern about that. The maximum volume restriction. This is not for me, this is not a question of whether we're going to put some more speed bumps in, but these particular policies are all designed for a very specific reason with safety in mind. So I think I might be the only one, but I'm not going to vote for this. So any other speakers on this? Okay. Motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And that item passes with 4 in favor, 1 opposed. And that is the end of our meeting this evening. We don't have any more speakers, and I don't think we generally do remarks unless anybody else has got anything burning to say. Councilmember, no? Okay. Seeing no other requests to speak, Councilmember O'Donnell.
Very quickly, I always want to give a shout out to our staff when they do a good job. Sean Decker today waited very patiently at my home to service the solar that we had just put on to get it inspected by the city so we could actually have it turned on after a month of it sitting on our roof. So I just want to give him a big shout out. His wife is ill at the moment, so he wanted to make sure he got home. So I hope she's doing well, but I always want to give recognition where it's due, and that is you all have a good night.
And our city manager, John Conley, has a comment.
I just want to wish Deputy Mayor Contreras a happy birthday on Sunday.
Happy birthday. Very good. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.